Good morning. This is Pat O'Connell calling to order the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's regular open meeting. It's Thursday, May 29th, 2025, 10 a.m. We're here in the Bochum building. We are also capturing the feed through Zoom and broadcasting that on YouTube for the public to watch. So having called the meeting to order, Mr. Cameron, please call the roll.
Commissioner Nybert.
Present.
Commissioner O'Connell.
Present.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Present.
All commissioners are here and you have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Next, we'll rise and do the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, we have the agenda that we posted actually last Friday with the Monday holiday. Commissioners, do you have any changes we need to make to agenda before we proceed?
Mr. Chair, I do have one change. There's a item under discussion and potential action. And you have not received the materials for that yet. And so I would propose eliminating that section of the agenda and bringing that item back at another meeting.
Okay. So what we're talking about is a presentation on the West Connect planning. So sounds like that's not ready yet, but we'll just roll that to future meeting. Any other changes? Okay. I think we need the info, the outside folks. So, okay. So I'll move that we proceed with the agenda and defer item 10 to a future meeting.
I second you.
Seeing no dissent, we will proceed with the agenda as stated. Next up is public comment. Is there anyone here who'd like to provide public comment at this meeting? Seeing none. Mr. Rodriguez, is there anyone who's registered online to give a public comment?
Mr. Chair, there's no one signed up for public comment online.
Yeah, we heard the first thing you said and then nothing after that.
No one signed up for public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next up, we've got announcements. OGC, do we have any announcements?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one quick one and then another one from a member of my team. As promised at the last meeting, we had a new attorney join OGC 2 weeks ago, and I'm happy to say he's still with us. His name is Will Mount, and he's in the back there. And just wanted to introduce him to the commissioners officially and the rest of the viewing public. So welcome, Will. And then Aaron Lecoq, our appellate specialist, has a quick announcement as well. Oh, we're just looking behind me.
Morning, commissioners. I wanted to introduce you all to our extern for the summer. This is Abigail Nudie. She's a law student from UNM. I don't know if you want to say hi or say anything, but you don't have to.
Hello, everyone. Super nice to meet everybody, and I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, welcome aboard and go Lobos. I just say that to get under his skin. Okay, great. Next up, commissioners, as you know, I like to announce public hearings that are going to happen between now and our next open meeting, and we have one starting next week on June 4th is case 2400270 UT. That's Southwest Public Services fuel and purchase power clause. So that hearing scheduled to start at 9 a.m. again on Wednesday the 4th. If you're interested in that topic, that hearing. It's going to be broadcast live, so you can go to our webpage to get the details on how to plug into that. And then something you'll be hearing a bit about off and on through this meeting, I think, is that all three commissioners will be at the Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners in Portland. That starts on Sunday and runs through Wednesday. So we're not, some of us are moderating panels, and we'll be there. Commissioners, did you have any other announcements?
Mr. Chair, I just thought it'd be appropriate to thank everyone last week who participated in the workshops, and also yesterday, all the cooperatives participating in that workshop. And we had a room full yesterday, and it was good to see great participation by them in our quest to update our rules. We know we're putting a lot on you guys with all the rulemaking that's going on, but bear with us. Hopefully at the end of the day, we'll slow down and maybe not be so engaged in the rulemaking aspects, but we appreciate the participation.
Thank you. Agreed. And then just so you get to see it first, the Western Conference of Public Service Commissioners is in Portland next week. A year from now, it's going to be in New Mexico at Tamaya. And so one of the things that's going to happen at Portland next week is just try to transition from Portland to New Mexico. And so tradition there is you've got a little teaser video. And so I want to recognize Jordan Gutierrez, who has produced the video, and he's working on the conference planning team along with Jennifer Baca, Choya Corey. Unless these two guys do something weird, I'll be elected president at the league, and then I'll be nominally in charge of producing that event, but it's going to take a team and a village. And so I just thought it'd be nice to preview this video for New Mexico before it gets shown in Portland. So Patrick, if you could air the video that Jordan has created for us. We're testing our technological limits here, I know, but here we go. Not getting the audio, but so this is a good dry run. What you're missing is the music in the background, but then again, the point of this video is try to get people interested and excited about coming to New Mexico. So we've got some kinks to work out on how to broadcast this next week. So anyway, I just wanted you to see that, and I proud to have this job and work in New Mexico, and just having been a connoisseur of these, ours is the best so far. So thank you, Jordan. Moving on. Next up is Employee of the Month, and Commissioner Nybert, I believe, has that honor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is indeed an honor to recognize an employee of the PRC. The adjectives that go to this person that were on the nomination form are show that this person goes above and beyond the call of duty. This person is kind, responsive, thoughtful, always volunteers to help, and accomplishes all that with a smile. And I think we could all, as we enter the workplace, should bring those attributes to the workplace as we interact with one another. In addition to that, she's an incredible team player. So this month, it's my pleasure to recognize Peggy Martinez Real with the Employee of the Month trophy. And the certificate reads as follows. New Mexico Public Regulation Commission hereby recognizes Peggy Martinez Real as the NMPRC Employee of the Month for June 2025. Whereas Ms. Peggy Martinez Real serves as a paralegal in the legal division of the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, and whereas Peggy has worked for the PRC for 6 years and 7 months. Whereas her nomination states, Peggy always goes above and beyond to assist the legal division. Peggy is always kind, responsive, and thoughtful in her communications with the team. Peggy always volunteers to help even when she has a lot on her plate, and she always does it with a smile on her face. She's an incredible team player, and the legal division couldn't do what it does without her. Peggy continues to serve the PRC with dedication and great ability. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission of the State of New Mexico congratulates Peggy Martinez Real on her selection as employee for the month of June 2025, issued under seal of the commission at Santa Fe, New Mexico, this 29th day of June 2025. And I take it, John, that you're here to accept the award for Peggy, and we hope that you will.
Yes, please. Peggy couldn't make it, but she's very appreciative and thankful, and I will make sure she gets this belt, and I'll make sure she takes a picture wearing it.
Please do. And we'll get it published.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you very much.
Tell her our congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is approval of prior meeting minutes. We had 2 minutes in our package for this meeting. There was a May 1st regular open meeting, May 8th special open meeting, and I reviewed both of them. I didn't see any changes. Commissioners, do we have any changes or a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve both the May 1st regular meeting and the May 8th special meeting minutes as presented to us.
Second.
Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Nyberg,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilar.
Yes.
The motion to approve the minutes for May 1st, 2025, regular open meeting, and May 8th, 2025, special open meeting passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I mean, we could have done a voice vote, but I've been joking that this meeting, we're going to have some presentations on reliability metrics. So that's great. Will probably take a while, but we're going to have the fewest votes per minute of this meeting, I think, of any that we've had. So want to keep you busy.
Appreciate that.
Next up is the consent action agenda. We have 2 items there. Are there any questions or discussion on consent? Seeing none, I'll move for approval of the consent action items.
Second.
Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Aye.
Commissioner Nyberg.
Yes.
The motion to approve the 2 items on the consent action agenda passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so next up, we've got 2 regular action items. Both will begin with a presentation from Mr. Lundeen from Office of General Counsel. First is, I think we're finally ready to issue rulemaking to revise Rule 1.2.2. That's something that we've been working on for quite some time. We've received comments from several parties. Thank you. We've had some very robust discussions within the building. We're also trying to think ahead. We've got, one of the things Jordan's been working on in addition to that video was our replacement for the e-docket system. So we're trying to write a rule that will accept that when that blessed event happens. And so anyway, that's the context. Take it away, Mr. Lundy.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. I've prepared for you today an order issuing proposed rulemaking and a proposed rule to amend the Commission's procedural rule 1.2.2 NMAC. We last discussed this matter at the March 6th open meeting. Since then, the proposed rule has been further reviewed through different channels within the agency, and I believe it's ready for the next phase of the rulemaking process. The Commission embarked on this endeavor to amend the procedural rules a little over 2 years ago, and the internal work has been ongoing. The procedural rules themselves date back several decades, but they were last evaluated in a comprehensive manner in 2008. This is a big rule, thus there's not really one major area of change to note. Rather, there's kind of hundreds of edits across the 40 sections that kind of sit as the structure on top of the foundation of the rulemaking endeavor, which is, of course, to clarify, simplify, and update the Commission's procedures, as well as implement some new procedures. I don't have much more to say than that. I'm standing to answer questions now. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything you want to talk about or highlight or potentially revise before we vote?
I don't know that there's anything. I think there's maybe some more revisions that need to be made, but I for one would like to hear from the public. So this is a first step in getting this rule out to the public to receive comment, and then based on those comments, we can then consider maybe making more revisions. We've made a number of revisions. I know Ms. Corey and the staff have really worked it over pretty good, and thank Mr. Lundeen for working with us on trying to work on the language, maybe simplify it. And if you saw the red line, there was a lot of material actually taken out of the first drafts that we received, or at least the drafts that I received. You guys may have seen 6 other drafts in the last 2 years, but appreciate him working to try to make them not only make sense for our operation, but to simplify things and to make it readable. So one thing that we requested yesterday, and certainly one thing that we'll request on all the rulemaking, we hope that you all will be very upfront with us on the things that work and don't work. If there's things in here that we need to change because it's overburdensome, or because it's unnecessary, or it doesn't meet how you would like the proceedings to transpire, then let us know your thoughts on those. We might agree, we might disagree, but at least we need to know what you're thinking and what you all would like to see in these rules. And from my perspective, these are the rules that control the procedures of this agency. And so this is not just a narrow focused rule on one little issue. This controls virtually everything we do in a public setting. So please spend some time. These rules are long. It'll take a while to get your arm around. It took me a long time to get my arms around, and I'm not sure they're completely around them yet. But please give us your thoughts. Participate in the public comment hearings that we'll have, and certainly let us know what you all feel about them. And so I appreciate it getting to this point, but this is really just the first step that allows the public now to come into the process. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I echo those statements as well, and very much looking forward to hearing from the public on these. As Commissioner Nyberg stated, that this is an NOPR, and so there are changes that could still be made, and want to thank Mr. Lundin for his efforts here. This rule is enormous. It's probably the biggest rule that we have, and it covers a lot of issues. And I think it's Commissioner Lundin, or I'm sorry, I just promoted you. Mr. Lundin has done a great job kind of balancing the different issues, and certainly we need to hear from the public to continue to consider how we're balancing those interests. And I want to highlight a few of the things that are in this rule. And first, though, I also want to note that we're asking for comments, for initial comments by August 21st. So there is time to consider this. And I think that's sufficient time, and I really hope that it allows stakeholders time to be able to respond. One of the biggest issues here is the tolling, potential tolling for rate case applications that come in. And there are two alternatives. There's one that is the tolling, and there's another one that would, in my view, essentially consider a stipulation. Let me back up a little bit, because I should probably explain what the problem is that the commission sees that needs to be solved. When there is a rate case and then there is a stipulation, the time that it takes to evaluate the stipulation cuts into the commission's time to evaluate the original case if the stipulation were not approved. And that puts the commission and the hearing examiners in a bad spot, because there is a statutory deadline that we would need to act by, and we might not have the time that we need to properly evaluate the case, because some of that time has been spent evaluating a stipulation that didn't work out. And so that's the problem. I want to be clear that the ideas here, at least for me, are not about delaying a response. The utilities need a response to their application, and you know, we work to give that response. The utilities need certainty one way or the other. And so I don't see in these alternatives a desire to, you know, delay. I know that we need to act, but we also need the time to evaluate the application. And so those are the things that we're trying to balance here. And then, so there's a potential tolling idea in here, and there's also an idea about deeming a stipulation, as I see it, essentially an amendment that results in a new application that would restart the statutory clock. And so we're asking for your feedback. If there are tweaks or amendments that would help the utilities and the stakeholders be more comfortable with either of these ideas, I would really love to hear that. I think the order kind of presents these as alternatives, but I think there's also room for the tolling and new application ideas to work together. And so I also would like to hear that. For example, if the utilities and stakeholders don't agree to the tolling, then maybe the commission can consider whether the changes are so significant that it essentially creates a new application. I'm very open to hearing the feedback on that. And then the other one that I wanted to highlight is the requirements around the variance requests. That's something that we've talked about at prior meetings. I think also there's room to continue to reevaluate even further than what we've proposed here in this NOPR. If there are additional considerations that the commission should consider, then I would appreciate hearing that. So I think those are the things that I would highlight for now as some of the major changes here. There are others. It's a huge rule.
Yeah, I'll just offer a B3 on what I've heard from both Commissioners Nybert and Aguilera. It's a large rule. It's kind of the source code, and then just emphasize something else. The idea here isn't to delay action. It's to get a good rule that answers a lot of administrative and procedural questions so that the time that we're required can be spent on the substance of the application. So that's really, for me, what we're trying to focus on with this whole process. So lots of things going on to that end. Hopefully this e-docket replacement that we talked about will make information flow better. We're talking about what can we do with 6-month procedural deadlines on cases we know that have to get filed. What can we get done before the filing happens, because we know it's going to happen. So those are the kind of things that you're just let people know we're working on it. So this 1.2.2 is not happening in isolation. And really the goal is exactly what both commissioners said here in the introduction to the vote on this item. And then Commissioner Aguilera pointed out the written comment. The first round is August 21st. We're also going to have a public comment hearing on August 28th. And then everybody gets opportunity for response comments September 8th. And so then we're shooting to get close of record on September 29th. So that's the schedule that you'll see when this gets published tomorrow, assuming it gets approved. So any other questions, or then I will move for approval of this notice of proposed rulemaking.
Second.
Mr. Cameron.
Commissioner Nybert,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Connell,
Yes.
Commissioner Aguilera.
Yes.
The motion to approve the NOPR in 23-00119 UT passes unanimously, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. And congratulations, Mr. Lundin. You and me have been involved in this for what, 2 years now? Okay, the next case is 22-00140, which is the rulemaking for our renewable energy for rural electric co-ops. We had a motion for rehearing, so take it away, Mr. Lundin.
Thank you, Chairman. Collection of cooperatives led by Tri-State filed a motion seeking clarification of the commission's final rule issued on April 17th. At the request of Commissioner Nybert, I prepared a bare order granting the motion, but reserving the commission's reasoning for a future order to be issued in due course. The future order that would come would likely be along the lines of a declaratory order or guidance document or advisory opinion. If you would like, I can speak a little bit to the substance of the request. If not, I can stand for questioning.
I'd like to hear I guess, Commissioner Nybert, the proposal.
Yes, Mr. Chair, this was on our consent docket, and it was just going to die a natural death with no action. And And it looked to me like, the movement was asking for basically whether or not their interpretation of the statute was, maybe accurate. They identified an alternative, reading of the statute that led to a different result. And I looked at the statute and it didn't seem to me that we ought to just dodge the bullet. We ought to just tell them we think that they're right, that their interpretation of the statute is a reasonable interpretation, and that you know, that at least I thought that we could tell them that it is a reasonable interpretation, and they don't need to worry about their alternative interpretation that they themselves say is not reasonable. And I agree. I read the statute. I think they have a reasonable interpretation. I think that's all they want to hear. Whether we grant this motion, don't grant it, or don't do anything, I think they just wanted to hear that their reading of the statute was reasonable. And I read it. I've talked to Mr. Lundin, and I believe his opinion is that it's a reasonable interpretation as well. So Tri-State, we think you have a reasonable interpretation. If that's all you wanted, then you ought to be satisfied, because at least myself and Office of General Counsel agree with your counsel's interpretation, that you have a reasonable interpretation of the statute. So I don't know whether the commission wants to grant, to deny, or not take any action on it. I just thought we needed to tee it up, make some public statements, and then move on. Because they really didn't request anything else, did they, Mr. Lundin?
That's correct, Commissioner Nyberg. The applicant or the movement is not requesting that anything be changed about the final order or the rule, just that we clarify how it's going to be implemented.
So I hope my statement clarified it. If you guys disagree with my interpretation, they probably would like to hear that you guys disagree with it, but this is a forum. And then, Mr. Chair, frankly, I don't know whether we ought to even have a motion to grant or to deny, because if we do nothing, my understanding is the issue goes away anyway.
Agreed. I guess I'll tell you, I was two things. The motion just, to me, wasn't persuasive. I mean, it asks us to rehear a section of the rule that I'm not even sure exists. I mean, it points at 17.9.571.10 F2. And when I go back and look at the rule that we issued, there isn't a 10 F2. And then the other is basically the whole argument is around Tri-State has a contractual arrangement that may or may not happen. So our rules should be written based on the law, not on whatever Tri-State situation is. So just the whole motion was unpersuasive to me. So that's why I thought let it die on the vine's a good outcome. The other is just big picture context. One of the things that I'm hoping to do as we move forward, and it requires doing exactly what we're doing here, being clear and explaining what we're doing, but the concept that everything is always appealable. Yes, you have the right to appeal, but make your appeals substantive and important. And since this one, they couldn't even get the rule citation correctly, told me this isn't a serious question. So that's why I thought it would be okay to just let this one die on the vine. And so I'm not in support of granting the motion. I mean, if they want to file another motion, they can, but maybe not. Time might be out, but still, if you're going to ask for a motion for rehearing, do it for a real reason, is my statement.
Yeah, so this one is interesting. Yeah, the section was misstated. It's pointing to a different one in the rule. I do see some merit to what Tri-State is asking to clarify. I think, but I also have concerns about granting the motion because I'm not exactly sure which interpretation they are looking for from the way that it was presented. I could read the requests that Tri-State is asking for in different ways. And that's why I would not be in favor of granting their clarification. I think that they have reasonable arguments that they've brought before us because they want clarification now for the future. And it could be that these situations are in 2040, 2045. And so I don't think it's unreasonable to defer those decisions to when they come up, if they come up. But I also see Tri-State here asking for guidance. And so then should we provide that guidance? And my suggestion would have been to maybe file a petition for declaratory order if you know the Tri-State is always free to do that. I just have concerns with granting the clarification outright because I'm not sure which of the 2 or 3 interpretations of their language that I take away from it they're proposing. And you know, I was running kind of through some numbers of like examples of how much I understand that Tri-State believes they would be responsible for providing, and there are specific situations where if you combine how much of the requirements a co-op is meeting on its own with like an 80% requirement based on what Tri-State is providing to the co-op leads to a result where combined they are not meeting an 80% requirement. And then there are, in a different interpretation, it does meet. And so that's why I would
Okay, so we got 3 different opinions here, and then like I say, I'm okay with whatever the result is here. I'm just not gonna vote for granting the motion, but yeah.
yeah, and
No action.
yeah, and my I didn't articulate this clearly, but I think my preference would be to take no action and then leave it up to Tri-State that they have the ability to file asking the commission to look at this via a petition for declaratory order.
Okay, so I'll procedurally ask, do we have a motion? Nope. Okay, so there's no motion, and so I appreciate you formulating it the way you did, because I thought that was a very elegant way, because either we grant it or we do nothing, and I thought those were the 2 best options out there, so thank you for that. And then sometimes inaction is action, right? So we'll see. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lundin. Then the next item on the agenda, we just don't have the information yet, so not ripe. So we'll move on to discussion, which is the meat of this meeting. Really, we've got a new rule on reliability reporting metrics. The rule includes a requirement by a presentation at open meeting from the 3 utilities that the rule applies to. So PNM, EPE, SPS, They've provided some slides, they're here. So what we've asked them to do is, try to do about a 20-minute presentation. At the microphones, which I apparently had off, so sorry to people watching online. Morning, gentlemen, and could you just start with introducing yourselves? And then the floor is yours.
So good morning. My name's Amnai Warner, the Vice President of Operations and Engineering with PNM.
My name is Jeremy Tabbitt. I'm the Manager of Distribution Engineering.
Okay, Commissioners, thank you for this opportunity to review the data and information. We really appreciate the opportunity to showcase all the great work that teams are doing. So that's one of the reasons why we brought Jeremy Tabbitt along, so he can kind of speak to some of the great work that their teams are doing. So we'll go to the next slide if we can. Maybe just to give you an overview of things we're going to cover, we'll go through the 2024 reliability metrics for PNM. We want to cover the top outages. So we presented this in the actual report, but we'll go through the top transmission distribution outages. And then we want to share what the MED days were within PNM service area, and then maybe share how active our weather patterns were across New Mexico and how they had an impact on our reliability. We break down our outage causes a little bit deeper than what we provided in the report. So we want to show you some of those details because that leads into our plans and how we do our plans. And really the most important thing I think for us to share is how our plans are integrated together and what we're doing to drive reliability improvements across our system for our customers. Go to the next slide. So as we build our plans each year and we build out 5-year plans, we refresh them every year. We do a very data-driven approach. We look at feeder performance, we look at the asset age, we do inspections. Like there's a lot of inputs that come into it. And then we marry that information with our planning groups as well. So our planning group teams are looking at hosting capacity for solar penetration. They're looking at load serving needs of the system. And we try to put those plans together to make sure when we're investing, we're actually optimizing our spend, our efforts, and addressing as many of the needs on the system as possible. So our plans end up, we end up with a very either surgical approach or a holistic approach. And we're going to go into the details so you can kind of see how those play out. The other thing that's really been new, and we talked about this earlier this month, is the wildfire hardening. So that's kind of a new element that's played into our investment planning in the last year. And just think of that as a new complement. There's some cases where it may actually make reliability worse initially by lowering risk of wildfire. But our goal is to bring the reliability back up in those areas as we implement those improvements. We're constantly implementing new technology as well. So we talked last year, the past couple of years, about our grid mod investments. So it's integrating of grid mod investments with our system hardening. We've also integrated AI in our high fire risk areas to help us optimize where we're doing our veg management. So there's a lot of new technologies coming in our space, which creates excitement for our team and really ways of optimizing our spend and our efforts. So go to the next slide. So if we look at 2024, the average service availability for all of our customers across our service area was 99.85%. So the service was available 99.85% of the time. We averaged about 1 interruption per customer. So just about 1 in looking across all of our customer base. We're a little over 550,000 customers. The average duration of the outage was 124.5 minutes. Again, that's averaging it out across all of our system. And then if we look at the customer average interruption duration index, it's 123.51 minutes. That's actually about 4 points lower than 2023. Our other data So this SAFE, so it's average service interruption, and then the SAIDI are a little bit higher than our prior 5-year trends. So 2024's number. Go to the next slide. Jeremy's going to cover some of our major events in 2024 that contributed to our SAIDI.
Thanks, Omni. So the top outage events we had in 2024, the top two were transmission related outages. The top one was a frame made contact with our 46 kV line in the East Mountains. This line is a radial fed transmission line, so meaning it only had one source of power going up into the mountains. And I'll talk about what we're doing a little bit later on to mitigate some of that. The second outage happened in Clayton, tri-state transmission locked out, and our P&M distributions feeders in Clayton are fed from that transmission line. So we lost the entire distribution in Clayton. The next two I'm kind of gonna put together, and the only reason I say that is because event number 4, lightning ended up striking one of our substation transformers here in Santa Fe. It was called Rodeo. In doing so, it damaged that transformer, and we had to shift load from Rodeo substation to South Pacheco, which is number 3. In doing so, 2 months later, we had a cable fault on South Pacheco. This drove up SAIDI numbers because all the customers that were originally being fed from Rodeo were on that feeder as well. So it affected a lot more customers than if it was a normal configuration. The next couple were also weather related. We had another 46 kV line trip due to weather. We had Cochiti substation switchgear failure during a rainstorm. The next 2 happened up in Las Vegas. We had a heavy snowstorm in November. We had a hot air balloon and then a broken cross arm. Next slide, please. So this slide, what I want to kind of show you guys is the upward trend in major event days. We call them MEDs. There's an upward trend. It's increasing. So last year we only had 2. This year we had 6. And what I kind of want to talk about on the MEDs is these are excluded from our SAIDI minutes, but we do have instances where a major event may be happening and it causes outages that do go into our SAIDI minutes before the actual MED does happen. So for example, we had that snowstorm in Vegas, which were on the last slide, 2 of the outage causes. But we did have an MED day for the snowstorm in Santa Fe and Albuquerque because it fell into that threshold of being an MED day. So I just kind of want to talk about that, and then I wanted to talk about the actual events. So 2 of the MED events were due to forest fires in Ruidoso. The next 2 were due to thunderstorms. We had a thunderstorm come through Albuquerque in late June that damaged some of the distribution lines. Then we had another thunderstorm mid-July come through Santa Fe and affect some of our transmission and substation lines. And then that snowstorm that I talked about in November were the last 2 events. And those came across through Albuquerque and Santa Fe. Next slide, please. What this graphic is to show is the correlation of heavy weather months versus the main contributors of our SAIDI minutes. You could see that when the winds kind of uptick in March, there's a larger chunk of the pie in SAIDI. And then when we get into our monsoon season, that's when you see a lot of the SAIDI minutes ramp up. And then in October, it kind of died down a little bit, but then in November, again, it was a bigger chunk of pie just because of that snowstorm that came in and really affected our system. Just trying to show that when the weather is relatively calm, the system holds together really well and we don't have a lot of SAIDI minutes, but when there is lots of weather events, SAIDI does spike up a little bit. Next slide, please. And this slide just kind of reiterates the same thing. It just shows the increase of thunderstorms that we're seeing across our system. Shows that we had a relatively calm monsoon in 2023 and then it spiked up in 24. And then you can see the correlation again with the chart I just showed of the highest SAIDI months and then the peak of those thunderstorms, how they correlate.
This one's almost like a blessing and a curse, right? In New Mexico, if we think about the years 22, 23 and going back, like we've been in drought weather. We haven't had monsoons. They've almost been non-existent. You can look at 2023, there really were not many monsoons or storms that moved across our service area. 2024 was a much more active year, which is probably more on par with what we want and we need for moisture, but it did have a very negative impact on our system. We've recognized that, we know it. There's plans we have in place so we can withstand those. And we're going to dive into the details. And that's what we want to reassure you of is like, we trend these data. We know what's going on. We know where the impacts are at, but we're implementing mitigation so we can actually weather through those storms with higher reliability in those service areas. So let's go to the next slide. So we talk about a lot about weather. The other thing we mentioned we trend is the age of our assets, because that should drive some of our proactive investments. And we just present this chart to kind of show the average age of our distribution system. And this is if we just bring everything together on a feeder, figure out what the average age kind of shows how things are progressing. You know, a lot of our infrastructure was built 60, 70 years ago. It's served us very well for many years. We're at a point now where we can almost reset some of those assets and we can build to higher standards as we have increasing weather patterns, as we have grid modernization needs and increase for electrification, then it's advanced some of our distribution design. So the timing is right. And we try to marry the age asset information with feeder performance. So we make sure we're rebuilding and resetting the asset age at the right time. So we'll go to the next slide. If we look at top outage causes, and this is broken a little bit more detail than what we presented in the report that we filed. So we break it down one grade, one level below. And if you notice, there's no cause that we put specific to weather. Our goal is to harden the system against weather events. The only exception to that is lightning. That's a weather event. So in trees, blue sky days, nothing's going on. We don't have tree outages. If we have thunderstorms, we have major wind events in March, April timeframe, then we do have tree outages. So, you know, there's ways that we mitigate that. Transmission outages, Jeremy mentioned that a little bit ago, is number 2 on our cause. It's really in areas where our system was built with a radial transmission serving distribution. And we've got a few key areas in our service area that is the case. Investment is very high to mitigate that. There's multiple different options we're working through. And then there's ways that we can harden the existing transmission system. Cable faults was actually number 3 in 2024, which we've got programs that are addressing that. Lightning, we've talked quite a bit. Vehicles, this one's a newer one to me coming into this role. I'm very, very shocked at how many of our poles actually are hit by vehicles. And then we lose the distribution, have outages. It takes time to go in and replace the pole, make things safe again, and then restore service. But that's actually number 4 or number 5 on our list. And it always seems to kind of hover in the top 8. Unknowns, anytime our crews cannot physically identify a cause, we ask them not to make something up. So that's why we have unknowns. And there's mitigations we're actually putting in place so we can try to track those down in specific areas as well. And then birds would be number 7, rounds out number 7. So go to the next slide. As we go into the programs, I wanted to give you just a precursor of the programs that you're going to see that we cover. So we have a very extensive veg management, and we've been ramping up our spend. It's been in our last 2 rate cases, which has been approved, and we're very appreciative of that. But that's to address the cyclical need of our vegetation management programs, both in our high fire risk areas and non-high fire risk areas. We have some very extensive transmission, substation, relay, so component and holistic at the transmission level to address reliability as transmission is impacted, reliability at the distribution level. And then we're going to show you the details between our surgical programs that we have and the holistic approach. We'll go to the next slide. In our veg management, and we talked quite a bit about this even in wildfires. So our high fire risk areas and transmission lines, we are on a cyclical basis. And so those lines are veg management every 4 to 6 years, depending on the data that we received. In 22 and 23, we actually conducted LiDAR surveys across all of our high fire risk areas to identify encroachment of vegetation to our lines. And then that's when we implemented the AI-based investment so that we can identify danger trees and mitigate those ahead of time. We're also reinstating a cyclical basis on all of the remaining service areas. We marry that with some of the programs that you're going to see. So open wire secondary is one, which is older parts of our distribution system serving customers, has high vegetation contact. We're able to reset the open wire secondary, add transformers for load serving capability and also hosting capacity, and then do veg management at the same time. So it's an optimization of our spend. And then anytime we're doing an asset replacement, then our veg management is captured underneath the asset replacement, the capitalization as well. So the message I want you to get there is it's not all O&M. It's really putting our O&M and capital funds together to optimize where we're spending for veg management. Go to the next slide.
So some investment plans that we're doing on the transmission side, you could think of them as like a short-term, midterm, and long-term goal. We have some projects on the slide. So we're doing some breaker replacements that'll help with miss operations, and if there's an unforeseen outage, some isolation. I bring up the reason I talked about the radial on the outage with the crane is because we do have plans to loop those systems, so bringing in that second feed for transmission. So if a crane does get into that line and damages a section, everything downstream won't be out of power. We could find an alternate feed to feed those substations and customers. And then long-term is line rebuilds on some of these, as you can see in Vegas, and trying to modernize them to the 115 kV standard. Next slide. So from a distribution standpoint, we have what we call programs. This is that more surgical approach that Omni was talking about. So these programs allow us to mitigate isolated problems that may occur on a feeder. We also can use these programs to proactively replace assets that are coming to the end of their average service life. So the way our programs work is they're a 2-year cycle. In year 1, we do data analysis and project scoping and engineering. And then in year 2, we do construction on those programs. And then we stagger those programs. So when that first cycle is in construction, we're doing data analysis and engineering on that second cycle. So then construction can proceed after that. And then with these programs, what we're doing is we're upgrading to our current standards. So direct buried cable, we'll put in conduit, we're looping radials and stuff like that. Next slide, please. So for our more holistic approach to feeders that are underperforming, we put all our feeders onto a list and we have certain criteria that we rank the feeders against each other on. So we do a cost benefit ratio. So we use the DOE ICE calculator to put an economic value on outages if they do occur on that feeder. And then we make a ratio against the estimated cost to rebuild that feeder and then do a ratio to see how those feeders score. We also look at age of the feeder. We look at worst performing feeder history and seeing how many faults that feeders experience. And then we dive a little bit deeper and see what kind of outages that feeder is occurring. Because if it is vehicle hits, rebuilding the feeder is probably not going to stop a car from driving into it. But if we're having multiple failures in different ways that we can't cover on a program, then we'll put it into the feeder rebuild. When we are doing the feeder rebuilds, we are adding bird guarding, lightning mitigation. We're upping our wire size to our standard size to increase capacity if wire is undersized. And then we're also looking at incorporating more feeder ties. So if unforeseen outages do happen, we have more ways to backfeed those feeders. Next slide, please. So in doing those programs, they help us integrate traditional mitigation programs with grid mod by adding more sectionalization, more smart devices into the grid. So they can be operated remotely instead of having to dispatch a crew to operate those. So it allows our grid to just self-heal a little bit quicker. And then to kind of touch on Omni's point about the unknown outages, we're also installing overhead fault indicators. And what that does is it just narrows down where the fault is taking place. So if the fault happens and the crew goes out there and they're unable to pinpoint where it's at, they can use the fault indicators and narrow their search a little bit more to see if there is a problem tree or maybe wildlife got into the line and cleared out by the time they got out there, but they can see if we need a bird guard or find out a way to mitigate those outages from happening.
The other point here is when we put together a package into mitigation, we talked about the feeder rebuilds. We're also implementing the grid mod technology of adding line secularization on those feeders at the same time. So crews are being dispatched. We're able to optimize the effort and the time on that feeder and get the full benefits. So the line secularization reduces the amount of customers impacted anytime there is an outage, and then also speeds restoration time. We'll go to the next slide. So, I mean, just in conclusion, to kind of wrap things up and summarize them again, our average service and our safety relatively close to what we've had in the 5-year trend. It's our safety that really ticked up a little bit more in 2024, which we've got mitigations in plan. We talked a little bit about the weather, and hopefully we've seen that as far as like the wonderful rain that came to our communities, but we recognize that it's had a negative impact. We mentioned the 6 major event days. All 6 of those were weather driven, whether it was the fire, the snowstorms, or lightning storms. Those are the MED. They're telling minutes off of those that have contributed, and then smaller outages as well that were largely driven from weather. But we believe we have robust plans between our veg management program, our surgical approach in the programs, and then the holistic approach with feeder rebuilds to really address the reliability across our system. Our team's very committed to it across the board between the engineering groups, maintenance, and operations groups. And they work very closely to analyze outage histories. Anytime we have an event that's greater than 500 customers or greater than half of a minute of SAIDI, the team comes together and looks at the specific event and the details, builds corrective action plans, and then they flow into our investments. It goes back to what Jeremy was talking about in the 2-year programs. So sometimes they're accelerated based on need. Other times they fit in and we're able to plan and schedule those programs together. So with that, I'll kind of conclude and then stand for any questions that you all may have.
Thank you.
And then, this is new rule, first year of these presentations, so I appreciate the attempt.
Yeah, forgive us for stumbling through a few.
No, I mean, this was, I think it falls in the window of what we should have expected. So commissioners, did you have any questions on the presentation or the filing? I mean, I've got a couple, but if you don't.
So in kind of the redesign of some of the improvements that you're making, how is the redesign better able to protect against the causes of the outages? And maybe if you could talk about that. So for the trees or
I'll take first crack at it and then you can. So when we're doing a full feeder rebuild, we're looking at everything. So like I said, we're adding bird guarding. So birds was one of the top outage causes. So we're bird guarding everything. We're actually putting larger cross arms out as well. So most our standard was 8 foot. We're going 10-foot cross arms. That does, it spreads the phases out a little bit more, helps with tree contact, making sure the trees don't push face to face. If there's wind, it prevents slapping a little bit. Also helps with birds. If they spread out their wings, just gives a little more space. We add lightning mitigation to all our feeder rebuilds as well. We can't prevent lightning, but we can kind of minimize its impact. So we add lightning arresters to our feeder rebuilds. We upgrade protection. So we add smart devices if we come across a hydraulic device, and then make sure that all our protection coordinates, make sure our laterals are fused. So again, if something unforeseen does happen, it's very minimized. We put taller and stouter poles. So that helps us kind of get above the trees a little bit, gives us a little more clearance from vehicles, maybe snagging a line, especially with a lot more joint users attaching to our poles. It just keeps getting lower and lower. So I think I covered most of it. I don't know if you have anything. Oh, open wire too. Sorry. So open wires are a really big cause for tree outages, just because open wires in the secondary space, which is a lot lower. So trees grow into it a lot quicker. So when we are doing feeder rebuilds, we're removing that open wire and either going with a shielded conductor, which we call multiplex, or removing that secondary completely and installing another transformer.
Looking at the 2024 reliability metrics page, which is about page 4. the interruption frequency index, one interruption per customer, is that? I mean, your service territory, you have some pretty rural areas, but most of your customers live in a very urban environment. And is that a normal range or frequency for the utility of your size?
I can speak to what our trend has been. And our trend over like the last 5 years has been closer to about 0.85 interruptions per customer. So, you know, it's close to a little over 20, doing math off the top of my head, but maybe 25% increase. And a lot of that was, we mentioned earlier, some of the larger outages that were transmission wide. And when we have a transmission outage, we drop larger customers because we're typically dropping multiple substations. Well, that's adding to the number of customers that are out, and that's driving that number up is what's going on.
Because it just, maybe my assumptions are incorrect, but I would assume that Albuquerque would have less interruptions than in some of the rural areas that are probably more prone to lightning, more prone to trees, more prone to some of the other high frequency events that cause these outages. And since that number struck me as, I thought would be a little high, considering, you know, you have a substantial population in one pretty confined area. And I would think that, you know, your service territory, that maybe people in Las Vegas or Ruidoso would experience more interruptions than the average person in Albuquerque, for instance. And I have no idea if that assumption is correct, but it just, based on the types of things that cause interruptions, it seems to me to be a reasonable observation on my part. I'd be interesting to see how it really breaks down over your service territory.
Yeah, there's can we go back to the slide deck? I think I may have that answer for you, and we added some appendix in there. If it's possible, and we'll go past the conclusion. I wish I would have numbered these. And then go down a few slides, and there's one that's labeled as PNM Historical Combined T&D Safety, SAIFI. Is that in the deck? It may not be in the deck.
It's like,
Okay, slide 20. Yes, thank you. So I think this is the breakdown that you might have been asking about right here, right? So the blue, if we look at 2024, the blue actually represents the metro area. And when we think of metro, it's the Albuquerque, Los Lunas, kind of that Rio Grande corridor. Northern would break off at, where's northern going up along the river?
So northern
You think
will
of
be Santa Fe going down to Cochiti, San Domingo.
So it does go as far south as Cochiti. And then southern represents the Ruidoso, Alamogordo, Silver City, Lordsburg area. So the average, we actually have more interruptions in the metro,
Wow.
more customer counts.
That surprises me.
And a lot of it, I think, is based on the design of our system. So we have a 115, I'm going to get too detailed, but maybe try to paint a picture. We have a 115 sub-transmission system across PNM service area. Our distribution transformers are tapped from our 115. I say tapped because if we lose sections of the 115, we actually lose multiple distribution substations, and that ends up adding to customer counts. Many of those outages we can restore relatively quickly because those are looped, or they're not a radial in the metro area. What Jeremy mentioned is our radial would be the East Mountain, Sandia. So if we lose the 115, then all of the East Mountains is off. There's a radial transmission that comes out of Santa Fe that feeds down through the Pueblos, the Cochiti, Santo Domingo Pueblos, and we lose that transmission, then all of those customers are off. Another radial transmission that we have is the feed into Ruidoso. So those communities are a little bit exposed on that and have higher counts. So
Well, thank you.
Can we go back to slide 10. I mean, I was working from the report that got filed and then. Yep. I was trying to, well, I was listening to the presentation, trying to compare the graph on slide 10 to table 9.2 on
We
the
can go to
report
that.
that got filed, yeah.
Uh-huh.
The big question is by far and away, the biggest type of outage on table 9.2 is P&M equipment.
Mhm.
And so why is that not on the graph?
Yeah, so it is. Let's flip to that and I can explain some of that for you. And if you go to our slide deck, slide 22. And Commissioner, we did this so we could break down and show the correlation of mitigations against causes, right? And when we file the report, the way we combine the data in the report is we actually put, if you look on the notes on the right-hand side, so equipment is a combination of cable faults, substation equipment, conductor slaps, and there's other equipment failures that fit in there as well. Like if we had a cross arm that broke, something like that. So any type of an equipment failure, those all get brought together. When we do our analysis, we want to kind of separate those. So we gather the data a little more granular so that we can make sure we address it, because a cable fault is one mitigation. A broken cross arm is a different type of mitigation. And we want to make sure the mitigations are matching the causes. So that was the only reason why we broke that apart when we were doing it in the presentation.
And so we've got like 3 presentations of cause, a table and 2 graphs.
Mhm.
So you're saying table 9.2 matches the graph on slide 22?
Correct.
Okay. Then I guess why subdivide it further with slide 10?
Just so that we could communicate how we're linking the corrective actions against the causes.
Okay. And then I also thought it was interesting, you have balloon on table 9.2, so.
We had that was one of our top outage causes, was actually a balloon incident.
Yeah, I mean, you saw a lot of balloons on that video, and part of that was because commissioners want a balloon ride when they come here.
We want them to have a safe balloon ride.
Yeah, yeah, no, what I tell them is taking off is optional, landing is mandatory. So, and then a lot of my analysis was the table 10 information.
Yeah.
So that was the cost. And for me, one of the values of this rule is making sure investments make sense because they're doing something, and we've got to always worry about affordability. So I didn't see anything in the presentation addressing that.
The cost side of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have the data, we just didn't put it in these, and maybe that was a flaw on our part during this first iteration. So which table were you looking at in the report?
You know, I was telling my colleagues, beware commissioner with calculator, right? So I was digging into table 10.2 and trying to see trends in spend. And so I was looking at things like CapEx per line mile or CapEx per customer, what the ratio is between CapEx and O&M. And, you know, I was just doing the math, and it led to a bunch of questions like, what's in these numbers, the CapEx numbers? Like, for example, is the sum of the T&D spends between 10.1 and 10.2 on CapEx, is that the rate base addition for that year for those two?
Let me follow you all the way through it because you went through several things. So repeat your question one more time, just so.
Well, we got table 10.1, the first line is CapEx transmission. Then we got table 10.2, first line is CapEx distribution. And I'm just trying to see if I went back and, you know, compared these to like rate case numbers, would I see that CapEx transmission plus CapEx distribution equals the rate base addition for T&D, you know, on P&M's books?
For the reliability aspects of our rate base, that is correct.
Okay, so that's really my question, is what's not in here?
So, you know, there's other, when we go, I'm going to dive a little bit into rate case. So forgive me if I say something, I'm looking at Kyle to help me. when we presented our rate case, there's T&D reliability investments that we presented, but we also have to build out our service area to serve new customers, whether that's interconnecting of new generation resources or it's building new substations to serve new customers that are coming. While those do provide reliability and resiliency to the system, I think in our rate case, we categorize those as building an expansion. So planning expansion type efforts. And then we broke apart our investments that were needed for asset management, which would be viewed as reliability.
Okay, that helps me understand this. Was that in the narrative and I just missed it?
I don't know if we wrote that in the narrative.
Okay. And then. So within these reliability investments, how many of those projects or dollars show up like in CCN filings?
Oh, that's a good question. So I don't know if I know, looking at Kyle, I don't know if I know the exact answer on that. Through a CCN filing?
I mean, this is first year curiosity kind of stuff, right? And then similarly, how much of this shows up in a 440 filing?
Anything that extends the threshold. Can you speak to how many 440s end up?
I don't know how many we have as P and M, but anything that extends the threshold, I think of $1 million will go through a 440 process.
Okay,
So most of our feeder rebuilds would typically
all-
trigger that.
Yeah, I think all of our feeder rebuilds went through 440. We have larger cable replacements, where we do the entire loop and there might be a rock or something like that where it goes over $1 million. We've had a couple of those. I know substation and transmission projects are usually over $1 million and those all go through 440. So distribution, it's more specific projects. Most of the stuff in the programs is under the 440 threshold. Because they're just a couple segments or maybe half a loop. But if we do identify a problem that is large and becomes a specific project, those all go through the 440 process.
okay, thank you. That helps me understand this table better. And then when I was just breaking down numbers, what I saw in P&M's numbers is there were between, 2015 through 2019 kind of stable, then a big jump in 2020, 2021, and then another big jump in 2022, 2023 in the amount that was getting spent. And especially the last jump was a big jump in CapEx versus O&M getting spent. So can you help me understand why those jumps happen?
Yeah, a lot of that has to do with our asset age. And if we look at our SAIDI performance historical too, it's kind of been following the same trend. Like our SAIDI performance, if we go back to the 2015 or earlier years, we were having higher, which really was because the system was younger in life. And many of those assets Jeremy mentioned are really starting to reach end of average service life. And so we're having to reset the asset. And that was one of the reasons we showed that graph that showed the average age of our distribution, is that curve's not going down. Like we've been watching it, monitoring it. And that's really what's triggered us. Like we need to start addressing this, both in a surgical and a holistic approach.
And then again, was that in the narrative and I missed it?
I don't know if I wrote it in the actual filing that we filed.
Yeah.
I don't know if we wrote that to
Okay.
that level.
Yeah, because I mean, just sitting here playing with the
Ends up being
numbers,
a
it's
lot.
like, hey, did the bean counters give them more money?
Ends up just being a lot of numbers instead of.
Right. Well, not just a lot of numbers, but is it cynical approach that, hey, I can spend CapEx in a way that's not being reported as a 440 or a CCN? Okay, so thank you. And then the last one, and just question. You sparked my question, Mr. Tabbitt. Could you explain this DOE? I think you said ICE calculator.
Yes, sir. So the way the ICE calculator works is you can type in what type of customer is on the feeder. So we have how many customers, and I think I've heard there's a new version of it. I haven't checked it out yet, but the old version you could do residential, small CNI and large CNI, which are basically like commercial customers. And you could input how many customers are on that feeder and run a report, and it would put an economic value on if you had a outage on that feeder DOE puts an economic value on what it would cost the utility basically.
So yeah, it's doing an economic analysis of outage impact to customers. And then when we implemented mitigations, then we're lowering that impact. So that's what creates the cost benefit. So the cost to restore or improve reliability versus the cost to customers.
Yeah, so that was exactly what I was asking the question. I mean, one thing that I still am livid with, it was watching what the interconnection costs were for community solar projects. And to me, that mapped out pretty well with communities that might be getting ignored. So when you're doing the DOE ICE calculator, is there anything in there about, say, the income of these residential customers?
I don't know
I
that
don't
there's an
believe
income
there's-
value on it.
Yeah, because I mean, you can see where some customers can bridge an outage easier than others, and just wondering if all we're focusing on it is fixing the things that have a lot of economic activity, we're going to ignore the places that the need might be greatest in terms of public interest. But so anyway, it's good that you're using something like that, but just curious to know how you're really thinking about the human beings attached to the wires.
What I'd offer, and I mean, appreciate the conversations, but we go through the ICE, that's a calculation. It's one way of prioritizing. It's not our absolute. So we actually just spent exercise in the last couple of weeks prepping for the next year, where we go through each one of our service areas, and we want to make sure that we're making investments in all of our service areas. And we get input from our field crews. We look at customer complaints. That part starts becoming part of the messaging as well. And so it's not like all of the investment is going to Metro. You know, we saw a number of outages in Metro that might lead us to make all the investment there, but that is not how we make our investment. We look at the need from the ICE calculator, the historical, and then we spread that across our service area to make sure we're doing something in Silver City, in Deming, in Santa Fe, in Las Vegas, that there's investments being made in all of those areas to address the top causes. So
Thank you. Commissioners, did you have any other questions? All right, I appreciate both of you coming here, and apologies if I don't remember seeing you before, but this is your first. All right, that's what I thought. I was just gonna say congratulations, job well done.
you broke them in easy. So
Yeah, and
thank you.
then again, thanks P&M being the first to the first means you're gonna catch the bow wave of my curiosity, but the other two have been warned, right? But so anyway, thanks for that. I'll say let's go ahead and take let's do a 15-minute break because we've got a ways to go still. So it's 11:22 right now. I'm gonna stretch that. Let's do it at 11:40. We'll come back with presentation from EPE. Okay, we are back. It's 11:42, so apologies to those on YouTube. Continuing on the agenda item of reliability metric presentations. Next up is El Paso Electric. We got Leslie Padilla here from EPE. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, for allowing El Paso Electric to present to you today. Leslie Padilla, I'm Senior Counsel with EPE based here in our Santa Fe office. And with us, coming live from Las Cruces, I believe, is Jason Villanueva. He is EPE's Manager of Distribution Operations. We really do appreciate the Commission allowing us to present remotely. Jason will review the reliability requirements of the Commission's rule in Appendix A. He will briefly discuss the linkage between the reliability metrics and our distribution planning, and he'll also briefly discuss staff's assessment of EPE's report this year. So we appreciate that. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Jason.
Hello, good morning. Can you all hear me?
Hear you.
Hello. What was that?
Take it away. We can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So as my colleague mentioned, I manage the distribution operations control center. And so can we move onto the next slide? Okay. So at an executive level, I'll be following the outline of the appendix and just kind of go down the list there and speak a little bit to the matter as we go along the presentation. So as mentioned by the other utility, PNM, seasonal windstorms and thunderstorms are the weather is the largest impact to our reliability. No big surprise there, but it is worth noting that that is the majority of our reliability. And we do experience about one major event day, on average about every other year. It's also worth noting that our major event days, we consider Las Cruces, or I should say New Mexico service territory, as part of our system as a whole. And so major event days are calculated based on system performance, which includes our Texas reliability figures, right? So this report, however, is all New Mexico data. But when it comes to identifying a major event day, we do consider our Texas data because we do operate across the entire system. New Mexico is about 1/4 of our customer count system-wide, Texas being the other portion. And so I wanted to clarify that, make sure we understood that the major event days are identified using Texas, I should say system data, Texas and New Mexico. And so a lot of the times we have other events in New Mexico that impact our system, and which we'll get to later in a subsequent slide. 2024 safety and safety figures were a little bit better than the 10-year average, and we'll see that also in a subsequent slide. As far as New Mexico goes, worst performing feeders in New Mexico service territory have not repeated in the last 10 years. There is one exception, our Hatch 21 feeder, but regarding performance at a feeder level, there's not much deviation. There's not much outliers regarding performance. Next slide. So a quick explanation on how we measure reliability. Of course, we use the IEEE as our guide. That's pretty much our driving document on how we document and track our outages. We do track SAIDI, SAIFI, and CAIDI. We are doing all of these metrics on a per state, per feeder level. We also do it all at a per outage level. Our outage data set is very extensive, and we use it extensively for analytics on how to, analyze past and how to make decisions for the future. We do have a very strict audit process. I'll briefly describe it. It involves several layers of reviewing the outage data as it's recorded, and it starts with the operator. The operator records the outage, and they're supposed to review it within 2 working shifts and make sure it's documented accurately. Our outage analyst then goes through every single outage and makes sure it's following our guidelines. We do have established and documented guidelines on how to document our outages. It's followed by a reviewer who also goes through every single outage. And this is done on a month-by-month basis. And then he further refines the data. Then it goes to management, which management primarily focuses on the big hitters, on the high impacting outages. And then at the end of the year, we do get our audit department, our internal audit department to review the data, and they look at make sure all of our equations and not only our data is accurate, but also our equations and formulas in the spreadsheets are all accurate. And they often provide feedback every year. They'll find something we can improve. And so our review process of our outage data is refined continually. We only make big changes at the beginning of the year, obviously for best practices on data governance. But I do believe we have a very strict process in ensuring that we are categorizing everything as it should be. I do want to make a comment on MAFI coming soon. So we currently, as we expressed in the report, we do not have very accurate MAFI figures. We have some and we presented them, but I would not use them for analytics because it's very spotty, because we only document those outages that have SCADA. And a lot of our outages, momentary outages, occur on devices that do not have SCADA. However, we are expanding. Our reclosers are expanding as far as upgrading them to what we call smart devices that have communications. And also with our recent rollout of AMI, we also look to leverage that for momentary outage data. Next slide. So here's an image of our service territory. We do have about 40 miles to the north of Las Cruces and then 40 miles south of Las Cruces, with Las Cruces being our center, load center. To the north, we have Hatch, and to the south, we have Sunland, New Mexico. And then we have these taps that go off onto rural areas, but the vast majority is Las Cruces. And we try to highlight where the lines go, and so you can get a feel for where our lines run through. One thing that I guess was mentioned was color coding the reliability on the map. We didn't do that because we didn't really understand how we would do that, right? There's several ways to go about that. So maybe next year we can get some more guidance on how we can color code that regarding reliability. But for this year, we didn't really take a shot at it. Next slide. And oh, by the way, on this, if you can go back one more slide, please. By the way, you can see there where it overlaps with Texas. So we do have several circuits that tie into our Texas circuits. And so the system is interconnected and across primarily at a 24 kV level across to our El Paso, Texas circuits. And so we often shift power or do switching procedures across those circuits. We don't really, the state line doesn't really dictate operations. We just treat our system as a whole at that area. Next slide. So here, like I mentioned, when you see the summary of our SAIDI, SAIFI, and CAIDI, you see there that our SAIDI and SAIFI is green because it's below our previous 9-year average. So for the year 2024, our SAIDI and SAIFI did come in better than average. Our CAIDI was slightly above the average, but and of course the MAFI, like I mentioned, the MAFI is not reliable enough to really analyze at this moment. Next slide. Regarding our worst performing feeders, as common to many utilities, we do focus our efforts on these feeders, right? And a lot of our distribution planning is derived from what we have identified as our worst performing feeders. Our feeders that are identified as worst performing get extra feeder patrols, they get extra investment, they do get a lot of eyes put on it from all angles, right? From our supervisors in the field, from our engineers, and also from our design perspective. Whenever we're going to do any kind of new construction on them, we always are mindful to consider the performance of the feeder. You can see there that Hatch, from all of our feeders, we do have about 57 feeders in New Mexico. And from all of those feeders, we typically get about 1 to 2 worst performing feeders per year. Sometimes we've had none. But Hatch is the feeder that is showing up in highlight because it is a repeat offender. And Hatch, as the name implies, serves our Hatch area. It is a radial substation, meaning that it only has one transmission line feeding it. We do not have very many radial transmission lines or substations, rather. We have one in Far East Texas, and this would be our Far East service area. So it's very rare for us to have radial substations. But in this case, That is part of the reason why this feeder shows up in the list sometimes. It is a bit rural and the backfeeding options are limited. It is a kind of a low feeder, low customer count. There's probably about I'm gonna guess about 1,500 meters total in that area. And then this particular circuit has about 230, maybe about 2,000 in total in the area. But yes, so it's a smaller circuit out in the rural areas, and it is susceptible to a little bit more weather as well. But like all of our worst performing feeders, it does get the attention and investment that is due. We do have a process and a software that we utilize to track all of these worst performing feeders and the investment that's done on each feeder. Next slide. So here's a graph we presented on the report. So weather, as mentioned earlier, is the leading cause of SAIDI minutes. The equipment failure is next, and that does include a bucket of several types of equipment. As mentioned earlier, cable failures, cross arms, and all the other stuff that fails in our system. So that is a big bucket, and we do subcategorize those as well, so that we can focus our efforts. We do have subcodes for equipment and for weather. However, for the report, we kept it at the requested data level. You can see a somewhat of a downward trend in the activity as far as the SAIDI impact. It's a bit not much of a downward trend, but it is a little bit better than the previous years. Unknown is one of those categories that we gets a lot of attention from, especially from our executive management. It's not very it's frowned upon when we categorize something unknown, but obviously sometimes we just don't know, and so we do try to give us attention as well. We do feeder patrols on every time a feeder operates and the cause is unknown. We do immediately do a feeder patrol to try and within the next day to try and identify the issue. Next slide. So here we talking about our major event days, and like I mentioned, our major event days do derive from Texas and New Mexico data. So you'll notice that some of these New Mexico numbers are a bit low, relatively speaking to a major event day, and that's because on this date our system was impacted severely, but the majority of the impact would have been in Texas and not New Mexico. However, there are some that New Mexico as well did take a good brunt of the impact. On 7/11, 2021, that one was a thunderstorm that did impact primarily New Mexico. And as you can see there, on all of those major event days, that the vast majority of customers are returned to service within 24 hours. And of course, our SAIDI and SAFE would be higher than normal blue sky days. We did have a snowstorm that came in as well, and that one was a very, very impactful major event day in 2015. It did impact New Mexico not as much as Texas, but it was very impactful on the customers that it did impact because we were 88% restored at 24 hours. So the problem on that windstorm was obviously we're not accustomed to windstorms in the desert environment. However, we did I do believe that 88% is still a reasonable restoration efforts for 24 hours. There was a lot of wire down during that time. We did assess the situation afterwards, as we always do with major events, to improve our practices and how to respond. But honestly, we don't get a whole lot of practice with snowstorms. And then also windstorms are the other events. Those are very common for us here recently. In particular in this year, we've had more windstorms this year than we've had in previous years. It's also coupled with dust storms that come in from Deming. So we do have a lot of low visibility situations as well associated with the windstorms. Windstorms tend to have longer restorations due to the damage they cause. Next slide. And then here, these events are more New Mexico specific. And so they're the higher impacting events that occurred in New Mexico that are non-MED days. And so I'll just briefly go down the list here. Here recently, last year, was one of our biggest events. So 6/29/2024, last year in June, we actually had back-to-back events. We had a windstorm followed by a thunderstorm. It was very impactful because the first event was significant, and it did cause quite a bit of impact, several poles down across the service territory. And while we were still recovering from that and repairing on that situation, we then had a thunderstorm come through and impact the same area, which caused us to pull in some of our Texas resources and go assist in New Mexico, which we do. We don't do it very often, but we do it as needed. We do bring in Texas resources to assist in New Mexico as needed. We also utilize contractors to help with repair during storm situations. They do not troubleshoot due to the limited inherent knowledge, or I guess in-house knowledge that's associated with troubleshooting our system, but they're very active when it comes to storm repair work. Our contractors are. The next one down is a thunderstorm in 2020. By the way, the previous one, 55% of our customers were restored on that 24-hour period. And that was primarily because poles were down in areas where we did not have backfeed options. Our philosophy for restoration efforts is always to isolate and backfeed prior to finishing repairs, if at all possible, unless the repair is short or quick. So we often will restore service before making repairs. In this particular case, a significant amount of customers were behind downstream of the damage that did not have backfeed options. So that's why that 55% is a little lower than our average on 24-hour restoration. And then the other one on the 8/23/2020, that was a routine thunderstorm, and you can see the impact there to 10,000 customers, which is, by the way, we do have about 109,000 customers in New Mexico. So 10,000 customers is a good little chunk of our customers there. But it is a routine thunderstorm, which we responded to with our normal practice and got 99 customers back in within 24 hours. Some of our other more significant events are for New Mexico would be the substation issues. So our Las Cruces substation does have quite a bit of customers on it. It feeds our load center area. And so you can see that 2 of those remaining outages were due to some substation equipment issues, impacting quite a bit of customers. And so that last one there is almost 28,000 customers impacted due to that substation matter. As routine, we do follow up and investigate these matters, and our substation department does check up on all these failures to make sure that everything's reliable. A quick note on that 1/12/2022 event. We had a fault on 2 feeders. Our protection settings, which I'm sure is common for many utilities, it's very difficult to protect when a fault affects 2 circuits. The usual behavior there is that it trips the transformer at the substation, and that's why we had a higher customer impact on that situation. Next slide. Also, our C-lid performance. Many of our customers do not experience outages greater than 12 hours. It's very, very rare. This data is from 2024. And as you can see, only less than 1% of our customers experienced an outage greater than 12 hours. And for this data, that would have been for the windstorm we had in June of last year that impacted these customers, and 434 greater than 12 hours and 405 greater than 24 hours. Next slide. So as far as customer complaints, we had none officially made to the PRC, Mexico PRC, regarding service interruptions. There were some complaints that were made to our customer service department. However, we do not track those. Those are kind of the informal complaints that require a call back to the customer, and we kind of work it out with the customer and put them at ease, letting them know that what we're doing with the situation. We typically get those, but we did not have a current practice of documenting and tracking those that would provide an easy way to report those. However, going forward, and primarily due to this request from you all, we did ask our customer service department to do that. And so within the software, they do have codes. They can now document these calls, and we will start having these for you for future reference. Next slide. Okay, as far as costs go, I did notice you had quite a bit of questions on this for the previous utility. So one thing that you might have noticed is the big jump in capital investment in year 2023. By the way, we didn't have 2024 available at the time. I'm not sure that we do yet, but this was exactly what we provided for our FERC Form 1. And so it's basically the same information that we provide there. And so you do see a jump in the 2023, and there's several factors there that impacted that, and that's because of inflation. We did have a little bit of a backlog on some investments we need to catch up on. There's also some of our transmission lines that we wanted to go from wood to steel, some of our high priority transmission lines, and so the jump there is significant. Would require a bit more digging into to get you some particulars there, but as far as today goes, that's pretty much the info I got regarding that matter.
And Jason, this is Leslie, just 1 minute, just for folks' reference, the tables, we followed the format in Appendix 1, and maybe we could have labeled the top columns differently, but the most right-hand column is 2024, year 1, then would be 2023, and then going backwards.
Yeah, when we wrote the rule, we were trying to be generic for future years, so.
I think next year we'll be able to make this.
Don't take that so literally.
Too literally.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then while you're on that, can you explain the big jump in year 5, which I think is 2019?
I wouldn't have. I'm not sure if that lines up with our change in ownership, but no, I wouldn't have those details today. I'd have to owe those to you.
And when you're pulling those details together, could you explain what the phrase investments that we need to catch up on means?
Okay.
Thanks.
And Chair O'Connell, would you like us to follow up in this docket on that, or?
I think we're gonna need to have a conversation about that. I need to talk to staff.
Okay.
Before I know what the answer to that is.
Sure. Thank you.
Another thing too, I think on the big jump on recently is AMI. AMI was a significant investment, one of our biggest in recent years. Okay, next slide. So here is our inspection and replacements, and you all did comment on this one. And it was our mistake. We did not have the word restored on that column header, holes restored / replaced. So that obviously changes the meaning of the whole thing if that word is missing. So we did have a correction here. And so poles replaced versus, I'm sorry, poles restored versus replaced is the difference there between the / mark. We do have a pretty somewhat consistent inspection rate. We do use contractors for this work, and they do document everything to us for reporting purposes. Next slide. Okay, narrative on other work plans. So this is some quick list of some of the work we do regarding reliability. A lot of this is driven by the worst performing feeders. So we do have a feeder patrol program. We physically patrol our feeder circuits on a 3-year cycle. More frequent if they make the worst performing feeder list. These findings are inputted into our work management system for full trackability. Cable replacement program as well. We do use outage analytics and dashboards to identify areas that have repetitive cable failures, and our engineering department uses our outage analytics dashboards to focus on where they're gonna invest our cable replacement funds. Overloaded transformer program. We do experience a few service transformers that overload during the summer. Some of that is due to customers not advising us of upgrades, primarily from swamp cooler to refrigerated air. So we do try to proactively identify those and find those. We have several approaches that our engineering department takes to, and now with our AMI data, we've been able to up our game there. But that is another program that is practiced every single year, and we do replace transformers to try and avoid overloads during the summer. We do also do the same practice for fuses, lateral fuses on overloads as well. Our substation inspection program, we do have a dedicated maintenance crew that inspects all of our substations once a month. And we have routine feeder, or I should say breaker maintenance as well. I want to say on a weekly basis, sometimes daily basis, we do isolate breakers for maintenance all year long. As our asset management software, our substation and transmission and relay area, they do utilize a asset management software to help manage their assets. In distribution, we are currently in the early phases of planning and asset management, but as far as TSR goes, they practice that. Our transmission patrol program is also very involved in a cycle, and so we make sure to get all of our transmission lines patrolled as required. And of course, all of these findings and all these programs do, if anything is emergency, it gets addressed immediately, and otherwise it gets put into our maintenance workflows. And we do utilize LiDAR as well for transmission. Next slide. So at El Paso Electric, we did not have any planned or unplanned electric interruptions that were required from our distribution or transmission system due to wildfire. We don't really have a whole, especially our distribution system. There's not a whole lot of vegetation issues. We do have areas, of course, in our system that have pockets of that and require attention, but at a large scale, it's not a very large impacting issue. Our transmission line does have a little bit more exposure to that as they do go across the state. However, for 2024, we did not have to drop anything due to wildfire risks. Next slide. So we did want to itemize or address the issues you all mentioned. So we did obviously fix the typo we had on the filing reference. Apologies for that. We did miss that. As far as our MAFI data, we are gonna, I suppose for next year, we can provide an update on how we're moving along and improving those numbers. Regarding the non-compliance for the poles replacements, it was due to the lack of that, or the typo, lack of that word replaced. All right, I believe it was replaced. Next slide. MAFI was also it was mentioned in the recommendations as well, but I've already spoken to that. But we do plan to improve that for 2025. However, though, we will not have that data for next year, but we are making policy changes and improvements to start tracking that in a reliable way. I did mention the color coding to our map. I would say that we probably need a little bit more direction on how you all want that color coded, because we talked about it a little bit, and there are several ways to tackle that, and we would just need to come to an agreement on how that can be done. Data transparency, that's regarding the polls as well. Again, the polls replaced. And then there was a question about bulk versus non-bulk. I do believe that data on our costs does include bulk and non-bulk. The non-bulk being our 69 kV circuits, which we do have a few in our system. Internally, we do consider them transmission, but obviously they're not the threshold for bulk. So I think for next year too, we can improve on that reporting. And we had addressed number 5 as well. Next slide. Okay, well, with that said, I'm happy to field any questions.
Commissioners, any questions? I just have something I can offer on your request for guidance on this color coding map. One of the things that the rule was designed to do was to have all three utilities reporting at the same time. And concept is peer pressure is a self-cleaning oven. So look at what the others did. See what makes sense if you're a reasonable human being looking at the report and try to come up with something good. And then just as an aside, that was one of the things I took away from that trip to the UK. Ofgem does public rankings of their utilities to show things like how much are you spending per line mile, and ranks them in transparently publicly. And so if you're at the top of the list, you got a set of questions to answer. If you're at the bottom of the list, you got a set of questions to answer. So that was part of the design of this rule. See who's really taking responsibility affordably to heart. So that's just guidance on color coding maps, and broadly, what are we doing here today from my point of view.
Okay, that makes sense. There's some liberty there to.
Yeah, and then
Present something.
you captured my questions on your table 10 too, so thank you for that. I mean, one observation is you're using FERC Form 1 data, good, that's auditable and traceable. But it's really important, I think, for EPE and we'll see with SPS to show what you're spending per mile in Texas versus what you're spending per mile in New Mexico. See if those jurisdictions are somehow getting treated differently, or if there's a reason they should be treated differently. So any other questions? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And again,
Thank you. Thank you, Jason.
then our final utility presentation is Southwest Public Service. Thank you for joining us from Amarillo. You're getting lots of windshield time.
Get to know your friends that way.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so turning it over to you, just remember to turn the mic on, and if you could just start with introducing who you are.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for having us over today. I'm Kyle Ingham, Regulatory Policy with SPS.
Aaron Moore, I'm SPS Distribution Design Director.
You can go ahead and move to the next slide. So everybody in this room, I think, has probably already had the opportunity to review at least 3 of these reports, and we've been through 2 of these agendas already. I'm not going to read the slide to you, but generally speaking, we really appreciate the opportunity to develop these reports. It's given us an internal assessment. It's given us some really good opportunity to communicate both internally and externally about our thought processes, the metrics that we're using, our decision-making, and everything else that goes into the distribution planning system and making sure that we're reliable. Today, Aaron's with us. He is very much an expert in this, been involved with rate cases, and is going to walk you guys through some of these tables, some of these report items that are in the report. And if any policy and regulatory items come up, I'm available to help you out. So thank you guys.
Yeah,
move on to the next slide.
So yeah, first off, thanks for having us again. Yeah, talk through a little bit of our reliability practices. Going to be very similar to what a lot of what PNM and EPA have mentioned as well. Maybe hitting kind of the top 2 items on this slide first. It really is just kind of our overhead distribution system and meeting exceeding requirements, and what maybe a lot of people would call the table stakes, and just, you know, the ins and outs of what we do every day as a utility. And so grade B construction is our new standard across the board. That's a higher level of construction standard than what many of us used in the past, as PNM kind of got into and mentioned. Taller poles, stouter poles, that sort of thing, capable of withstanding more attachments when we have, you know, communications attachments to it. So all of us, I'm sure, but certainly on the SPS side, heavily involved with, you know, kind of upgrading our system as we naturally do maintenance and capacity enhancements to get to the Class B construction standard. So that's one thing that's ongoing, and you know, a kind of core part of our increase in reliability is just kind of raising the bar from what was historically maybe accepted on grade C construction. Of course, like PNM mentioned, the other piece of that that's obvious is, we all have a very aged system that's also at a lower standard than where we're getting to. So really expecting, and what we're seeing in the data is even evidence from the moves to this higher standard of just more resiliency to weather events. Meeting, exceeding the requirements. A lot of this has to do with the programs that we have in place. A lot of this is within the filing, didn't bullet point every single program that we have. Similar to the other utilities though, we've got a pole inspection program, which is essentially on a 12-year cycle. We inspect our entire system on a 12-year rotating cycle. And then corrective action that follows from that essentially corrective action is on an annual cycle, but with a grading based off the grading classification from the inspection and the treatment process. So higher priority, more concerning pole, we replace more quickly within our construction process and policy versus, kind of a borderline pole. We tolerate a year replacement cycle on that particular pole. So have a number of different programs, but priority pole is a big one. Another one of the programs that we have is a routine patrol program. That one's tailored in-house, some feeder prioritization based off some of these metrics that we'll get into based on feeder performance. But bottom line, it is a routine patrol program as well. So there's not necessarily bias towards improving the reliability or using ICE calculator or some of the other enhanced benefits that we're looking for really from kind of an economic benefit or from a customer experience benefit. It's just wholeheartedly to make sure that we're looking at our system across the board on a regular cadence, and that we run that program at about a 5-year cycle on average. So those two are big programs. We have many others that or even developing. I like that I saw EPE and what they had on transformers is we've built out the fan within our field area network, which is a communications network to allow us to enable AMI. That's now offering us capabilities to do detailed transformer overload analysis, probably like what EPE is doing, probably EPNM as well. And so we're taking advantage of that new data available to us to start performing that analysis and try to really get ahead of the curve on, instead of running transformers to failure, trying to proactively replace and do that before customer experiences an outage. So a couple of the baseline stakes and baseline programs that we have in place, kind of for the more chronic condition, the long-term kind of condition and routine. We have also a feeder performance improvement program, which is really far more tailored. This is tailored towards these kinds of reliability improvements on poor performing feeders and specifically. So it's things like, rebuild due to poor performance or rebuild due to a number of factors. Could be a risk scoring that we have that we look at, maybe some wildfire prioritization, age of the system as well, and rebuild necessity along with capacity needs. The bottom line, it's focused on performance and improving performance as it relates typically to SAIDI. New technologies coming down the pike and things that we'll probably talk a little bit more about later in the slide deck, but we talked about AGIST and a little bit about ADMS. Flizzr, I know, has been mentioned as well on fault location from reclosers. That helps us pinpoint specifically where we have faults within the system to reduce response time. So that's something that we're looking forward to, and really just, here recently kind of delving into and advancing on, and then also some self-healing capability that we've been doing as a company, but really rolling into our jurisdiction as well. Maybe a little less opportunity, often more opportunity within metro environments. We've had some of this actually operating on a self-healing format within Denver Metro. Even here recently, we had one of those. So an opportunity for all of us, but maybe a little bit less so in the New Mexico jurisdiction, just based off kind of customer profile and the benefits. Then also, new technologies coming, distributed energy resources that can put different pressures on our system from both protection on fault current and reclosing and how we operate the system, and reverse current flows and that sort of thing. So just other things that we have to adapt to as we're moving forward here with reliability, and also has impacts on our generation. So we can actually shed generation when we lose customers. That can cause some transients and some other issues on our system. So next slide, please. I think I'll kind of fly right through this one. You've probably heard now SAIDI, SAFE, KD, CME. safety, yeah, we can rattle off all the acronyms all day long, but the standards across the industry, you guys know are well aware of, and of course, how we've reported the data. And we'll get into some of these specifically as it relates to some of our specific regions within the system. Next slide, please. So we did produce a map to at least show the utility service territory map, just to tell the story of kind of where we're located and some of the unique challenges that we may face within the specific areas. So maybe working a little bit about the nature of our system. And I think Commissioner Nyberg, you mentioned this maybe also on, kind of the differences between metro environment versus kind of more rural environment. Generally speaking, more of a rural environment type approach. We have more of the cities within southeastern and eastern New Mexico jurisdiction. We don't have that much rural line in the whole scheme of things. It's all mostly small cities. However, the exception would be Hobbs and Carlsbad jurisdictions, which we'll probably get into here in a minute. It's just general profile of our system. I mean, even some of this, I mean, these territory maps aren't, just cut and dry. I mean, primarily, Clovis District, for an example, is Tucumcari, Clovis, Portales. We have the cities. We don't have a lot of rural outside city limit jurisdiction, though we have some. Kind of a small urban footprint within the north. As you move down into the south, though, it's important to note that the two big boxes of southeast New Mexico within Carlsbad and Hobbs, then those present kind of a unique set of challenges for us as a company, and perhaps even a little bit different challenges than PNM or others might face, certainly different than our metro environments or, our Amarillo service territory. And a lot of those are really namely, we have a large volume of primary line, a lot of circuit miles, distant from our service centers where we respond from. So it can often take a long time to get to an outage event. And to analyze and understand what that outage is. But then even more so, what complicates much of this is we also have a lot of primary oil field line that's tapped off of our line. So we'll give them a flat tap or a primary meter, some different service options off of our primary, and then they can have primary that goes out and serves customer, their lines rather, as a customer. Within their leases that they have. So a little bit of a unique situation for us, even within our jurisdiction of Texas, New Mexico, and especially as Xcel Energy as a whole. So we have to deal with it a little bit differently. It adds additional exposure to us as a distribution utility on the distribution side for us to coordinate and really not let their faults or their system quality or their system issues impact our system and can present some challenges. Next slide, please. So looking at reliability and focusing on SAIDI really is kind of the key measure across all areas. We took much of the filing data that you guys have mentioned and alluded to, and really just kind of put that in a chart to try to help visualize over time, if you can kind of see trends or not trends. It may be nothing overly apparent, but just kind of some of the differences between the jurisdictions and what we face every day. Hobbs, as you can see there in green, has fairly high SAIDI, continues to be an issue. And this is, I think, namely the distance from the service center and the amount of oil field line that kind of impacts our system. And just when we have outages, they tend to be long duration type events that we have to respond to. And have take a matter of time to investigate oil lease roads. I know you guys are probably familiar with all that environment, but it's not trivial getting from point A to point B like it is in some areas of, say our Amarillo environment or something. Google Maps and Siri don't always work so well to navigate you in one spot. So next slide, please. So really kind of running through the worst performing feeders. I might just kind of touch on a couple of big picture items here. I don't know that I'll go into each and every single event for maybe the sake of time. But maybe kind of talk about high level what I see when I look at this list with kind of an expert on our system. Really, Battle Axe, Buckeye Jowl, Lee National, all of these circuits, every single one, not a single exception, are really Hobbs and Carlsbad oil field circuits, primarily 23 kV, newer 23 kV systems or long extended distribution line at 15 kV systems with a lot of exposure. And then maybe the other thing I would notice is the customers and the number of customers on the feeder. I think compared to a PNM or our downtown Amarillo areas, you have a extraordinary low number of customers on some of these feeders where you might have several hundred miles of line. actually on the distribution feeder, not to mention the customer exposure line, with actually a very small number of, oil field and industrial type customers. Not drawing any conclusions from that, but just a kind of a different environment than what we have in much of our area within Texas or even other jurisdictions of New Mexico. And then maybe something else we'll get into, I think, on the next slide as well. But primarily you start looking through the reasons above the threshold and some of the reasons for the outages. A couple of things kind of jump out as you look through these. Obviously, equipment and a number of different equipment items is P&M even noticed, and kind of we track those in a very similar sort of fashion, I think, as P&M mentioned, and we do as well. But then also lightning tends to come up, and wind and lightning. It's thunderstorm events, as EPE mentioned early on in their presentation. Weather's the name of the game for most of this, and how resilient we are to weather and how it impacts our system. A lot of that becomes prevalent kind of within even just these the reasoning column here within this slide. And then next slide, please. And then here kind of graphically showing this as a visual to where you can see, number of repeat offenders every year. It's pretty well equipment takes the cake. That there are some sub-equipment items, and as others have mentioned, we do investigate those and try to understand how we can better tailor our programs to avoid equipment failures, and whether those were a blue sky, what we kind of would call a blue sky equipment failure, which the vast majority of these again are, and it usually coincides with weather events, or whether there's something, we can do from an asset management perspective, like we mentioned with a pole program, to stand up a program more tailored towards a specific equipment type. So as we mentioned with, overloading transformers, we've had a run to failure model on that. Historically, we haven't had visibility. We haven't had data to be able to do a more robust analysis around loading and shortening life of transformers based off loading. So, as we get more visibility and as we get more data on systems, we tailor those programs a little bit differently to try to improve our overhead equipment and reduce its impact within our outage profile. Lightning is a routine offender. I know, kind of not just rattling off and reading the slide here, but a number that are always consistently on the list. Lightning is almost always one of them. Public damage and Hobbs specifically is just a magnet on those poles or something to vehicles. But I mean, every night we have at least one pole get hit in Hobbs, New Mexico, and you just wouldn't believe it until you see it, but it happens. And, we get the 2 a.m. blitz in Amarillo and, start seeing pole failures there as well when the bars close. But yeah, it's a reality of how we deal with those. There's things we can do from a mitigation perspective in some cases, the bollards and other things where we can, got poles on corners where trucks cut them too tight and causes line slap. And so there's things we can do on some of the repeat offenders, but kind of the random finding the next pole somebody's going to fall asleep and run into, or that somebody's going to be drunk and hit, those are much harder to deal with. So, it's a challenge for sure. I think that we all continue to struggle with. Wildfire, again, I know it's been mentioned a lot of times. That's what we'd all kind of call the plastic bushing covers, different way of covering up, protecting our system. Again, back to kind of talking about our construction standards. We have construction standards in place now. P&M mentioned 10-foot arms versus 8 foot. That's a construction standard across the board for us in a rural environment. Inside city limits, we have some 8-foot construction still, but all rural is 10-foot. That helps us with kind of raptor protection specifically, maybe not so much of our smaller bird issues that we have on a lot of underground dips and some of these repeat issues we have. So that's where we usually go after bushing protection, whether it's on transformers or underground cable to overhead and underground cable transitions, those sorts of things. So these are kind of repeat items that we often see within some of our reliability metrics that we go after as a part of our performance improvement plans, whether it's FPIP or some of the other programs that we've alluded to. Next slide. Again, maybe not talking through every single major event that we had, but maybe just touching on a couple within this list. So couple of major events, some hailstorm and just large kind of what we might all call just routine thunderstorms within the southeast New Mexico region that have a pretty sizable impact on us. Lightning's tough in those jurisdictions. When we have lightning, we often have high lightning frequency comparative even to Florida and some of those areas. as far as kind of a national footprint. So we do have a high lighting incident rate in many cases, which is harder to deal with. We do install arresters and lightning protection. That only goes so far, as we all know, within the industry, as far as, direct lightning strike and other issues, and really shortening those out. We also had some significant weather events within the jurisdiction. July 4th, we had, natural problems with July 4th, probably just from the day it is, but we had some significant flooding events within Roswell, and that also is that thunderstorm event impacted some of our areas and caused some extended outages in some areas. That was a once in, I believe, 100-year flooding event within the Roswell jurisdiction. So it was no light event. We actually, specifically to Roswell, didn't have so much damage per se from that event, but we did have some outages, some extended outages. We did have difficulty getting to some of our areas, and some rescue efforts involved, and another other wild events associated with that particular storm event. But those two made up a significant amount of our SAIDI for New Mexico, just as a whole. And then a number of other just kind of larger incidents that we had that caused us problems on our system. Some public damage, clear for public safety, some lightning strike and high lightning events. Just kind of more of what we probably call kind of your routine SAIDI numbers in the whole scheme of things, from kind of larger routine events that we had across the system, and a couple of transmission events that impacted us on the distribution side. Next slide, please. So we do also have the customer extending CLID, and customers experiencing long interruptions. Some pretty long interruptions within Southeast New Mexico. And again, I think a lot of this really, it's all around response time, and how long it takes us to respond to those events and get out to those locations. So, some of the substations we mentioned, Battle Axe, Sagebrush, Malaga Bend, some of these are a solid hour and a half of driving time from the service center. Of course, you got call out time to rise somebody in the middle of the night. It just takes a long time to get there. Once you get to the station, start patrolling those lines and navigating oil field roads, it's just a difficult problem to solve and to improve upon. But we are working on that. There's things we can do to divide our system in a way to where we experience kind of those outages impact a smaller number of customers. Still small customer numbers in the whole scheme of things in general, but to where we can provide an enhanced level of protection within our reclosing and our protection schema. And so some of those things, enhanced protection around additional reclosers, and also quicker response reclosers to try to isolate and prevent downstream public damage and wildfire risk, and some other things as well. So PNM alluded to this as well, but some of our reclosing and protection schema can improve public safety, but also hurt us maybe a little bit on the reliability side. So, but it's a balancing act. So next slide. Customer complaints, and we don't formally track this per se within our systems, but we did have some customer complaints within Carlsbad and Hobbs City, those cities individually. And I actually believe most of these, I can't remember the exact specifics on them, but I think they were both related to March 2024 PSPS events and us, proactively disconnecting power for safety purposes during some really high wind events that we experienced in March 2024. Some of this was coming out of course, a broader public perspective of the Smokehouse Creek fire that we were involved with, within the Canadian River Valley north of Amarillo there in Texas. So some extreme sensitivities for us to ensure that we, have a good handle on our system. We're responding. We have the public safety, at the forefront, and are responding appropriately. So we did respond with these. I think maybe don't have all the follow-up and all the details, can probably provide more of those if we need to, but I think actually maybe some changes or adjustments with maybe public perception even within the last couple of years, even as we kind of move through PSPS. I don't know what you guys are seeing on that, but I think for a lot of us, we're all adapting into kind of a new world, a new environment, a new way to deal with wildfire risk. And I think we're all starting to swallow that pill and learning to deal with it, and learning kind of where our risk tolerance is and how we deal with it in a more tolerable manner. But anyway, I think maybe we're kind of coming together there too, with conversations with cities and critical customers on how we operate the system. So,
And Aaron, and we have updated our procedures to track those a
Okay.
little bit more formally going forward.
that's good. I don't think anything to add on this slide. If y'all can go to the next one, please. So a little bit on trends with financial investment. My background's more on the distribution side, so I can speak to the green bars and the light colored blue bars on here more specifically. I think just, we wanted to chart this within the filing. You've got it as a table, maybe a little bit harder to see the trends sometimes in that format. So we put it in this one for the sake of visualization. But O&M wise, I think you would just see, consistently flat. That's really corporate goals, a lot of goals related to how we run a company, how we run a utility, a lot of continued pressure on O&M for all of this. So, doing everything we can to hold O&M flat. Actually, PNM mentioned some of the same strategies we all have and different things we're doing to try to hold O&M flat. We're trying to capitalize more. We're trying to get out and rebuild our system and take advantage of rolling all work that we can into our capital programs when we're on site performing that work and try to gain the maximum amount of efficiency with our investment. So veg management was mentioned specifically, I think, by PNM doing a similar sort of thing, or if we're going out doing a capital rebuild, hey, let's go ahead and take care of veg while we're doing all that rebuild work as well. And let's just try to cover, as much scope as we can while we're in that area and we're engaged on that system. But we are seeing, I think, a consistent trend. I think you would agree on distribution investment specifically within recent years, which is kind of a continued ramp up. There's been a couple of driving factors. I mean, the big overlying factor I think was mentioned earlier, and we've all talked to, is just aging infrastructure. These are total capital dollars for SPS distribution, so this does include Texas dollars as well. But there's really no distinction there on our investment, our plans, our way we operate our programs. Just continuing to invest in refreshing our system and performing, additional capital investment within the system to both rebuild it from a kind of strength perspective, a hardening perspective, but also just to gain capacity. As we all know, we have a lot of capacity demand on our system, and most specifically within the last handful of years. And so it's just driven a lot of additional capital investment on our side to be able to serve that capacity and get to a point where we can serve that capacity. Then we've also had AMI fan deployment, so communication network, and then now the AMI metering side of that. That's a part of our capital investment as well on deploying those new technologies. We have more stuff coming down the pike that isn't on here, but just modernizing our system is certainly a big part of the story. So, next slide, please. Inspections and replacements, and here's just a couple of programs. I think others mentioned the polls, and so we did as well in veg management. These poll numbers in the top chart is a subset of the total poll numbers that we have SPS operating company within Texas and New Mexico profile. So this is the New Mexico data specifically. Total system, we have about 500,000 polls. We run about a 12-year cycle, like I mentioned. So we're doing 50,000 polls on average, just roughly every year. And replacing on average across total company SPS, say anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 polls. Some of those polls here, we talk about replacements. We also have other measures that are we perform to increase the life of our existing polls through treatments. As part of the assessment process. So we treat poles as well. We also truss them, which is a steel, kind of C-shaped structure that we drive next to the pole and band onto the pole. Just a more cost-effective way to relieve below ground line defect issues that we have. When we have below ground line rot, but we have an above ground line that's adequate. We also have enhanced trussing that we do, which extends that truss on up the pole, say 15 to 20 feet. Which will just extend the life of that pole substantially. It's almost as good as far as a life perspective of replacing the pole, but just extends steel on up the structure to really just kind of, instead of just pushing the failure location higher up the pole, you really just kind of mitigate the pole failure problem in general without having to replace the pole. Another way that we can use different resources within, we're all struggling for resources on a construction perspective, common industry trend. We can use a different resource profile to still enhance our system and provide another way of hardening. So veg management's kind of been a routine activity. We've seen ebbs and flows over the years. There's been some different pressures there. Some of the impulse you see kind of there on the 2021 was a response from COVID, where we tried to pull back as a, to some degree, just to absorb the financial pressure that everyone across the world was experiencing from that pandemic. And so there was a little bit of a response there in 21 to kind of get kind of back on cycle, if you will. But on average, that's about a 5-year cycle vegetation program. But like I mentioned, we also do advance some of those vegetation cycle and some of that program within our capital rebuild programs as well. So next slide, please. And so maybe just kind of a little bit of narrative here on new things kind of that we're looking out, forecasting forward, moving forward. We have some outage investigation tools and some new tools available to some of our area engineers that are using. We've all kind of talked about just how we investigate performance data, outage data, how we trend it, how we hold ourselves accountable to improving, CELI and CME and SAIDI and some of these different metrics, and kind of assign those and perform that analysis on a more routine basis to where we can respond to it. So new things coming for us there, new things we've done. We talked about communications and modems, but ultimately it's about providing more real-time access to our equipment and visibility into our system so that we can better understand our system, its performance, the settings that we have on that system, and how we can more fine-tune those settings and offer improved performance of our system in general. And also, back to the AMI piece, it's just a hub for our AMI capability as well. So we can do enhanced, kind of analysis at the metering level, even all the way down to the individual premise and location. And then we've got some additional transformer fusing and fault location indication work that we're planning over the next several years. Some of this is related to even wildfire. It has multiple benefits, but wildfire performance. We want our system to operate as quickly as possible. We also don't want to create fires and flames when our system operates, like a lot of our traditional expulsion fuses do. And so the goal is to move towards either a more non-expulsion type fuse or vacuum type of interrupters, which don't have an arc and which much less likely to cause, sparks, if you will, to kind of come down into grasslands and cause fires on our system when it operates. So things we're investigating there that we're continuing to install on our system and kind of work within the industry norms and with, other industry best practice to start advancing on our system, and have already done some of that as well. And then fault location, we've talked about the nature of that and what it's doing for us, but continue to advance that, and even specifically not just about fault location and isolation and restoration, but even about just operating more quickly to prevent the risk to the, that our system can pose to the public as well. Just operating our system more quickly, most specifically whenever we have an enhanced risk from environment, from fuel loading, that sort of thing. So next slide, please. All right, getting close to the end here. I'll try to wrap it up here on the next couple, but just a little bit about wildfire. And I could talk about this one for about 2 hours. We've been heavily involved with this last year, and just a lot of work that we've been trying to do to improve and really respond to wildfire risk and provide an enhanced risk, reduction within our system. The first event that we had as a company, Xcel Energy Wide, was in March 24th. Immediately after our Smokehouse Creek event, like we mentioned. So very, very much in its infancy whenever we operated the system in March 24th of 2024. We've gone through several additional PSPS events within just here within the last 6 months, with a lot of the really high winds that we've had kind of late winter, early spring. And in a very different place than where we were, and have advanced and kind of polished up our processes and have been through this in the real world setting, not just practicing it, and kind of have a pretty decent methodology here in place. Some of that's highlighted on the right-hand side, but really just to tell the story high level, it's just we're tracking systems now from a meteorological perspective and talking about the tools there within that bullet. As far as in advance as meteorology has information on. And so on some of the really high wind events we had this year, put in perspective, meteorology and internal meteorology within SPS or Xcel was tracking those events all the way from Southeast Asia, about 10 days out, 7 days out. And, of course, it's a broad guess at that point, but still still some confidence. And then we just start narrowing that down as you get into kind of working down through that slide as we get into closer to the event, specifics of how we're expecting to respond, specifics of the locations where we expect the highest winds to be, specifics around scoping and group things my group's involved with around what impacts we're going to take proactively to de-energize our system, what things we can do ahead of the event 2-3 days in advance to get eyes on the system, perform any other remediation we see may be fit that we have outstanding that's critical or that we need to get ahead of this event. So a number of things that we're doing to prepare for these, and then we have a much more mature process on already, even just 1 year out from the 2024 event. So a lot of new tools, a lot of forecasting we can do about wildfire prediction and what a event could do if you dropped a match at a specific location. A lot of cool tools available that we're taking advantage of to really help us start fine tuning our PSPS approach instead of kind of a let's open the breaker sort of approach where we can put reclosers and devices in very specific locations to try to really minimize the impact to our customers, minimize the duration, and really kind of perform this in a much more surgical approach than broad. So next slide, please. And so just kind of how we're using metrics, I think won't belabor this one. I think all the other areas have covered this very well, but we ultimately use a number of different factors, safety, some of these metrics are some of those. We have some other wildfire risk scoring. We talked about Techno-Silva and some different ways we score risk on our system. We have capacity factor issues of where we need additional capacity constraints. We have aged infrastructure, some of that's correlated directly with age. Some of that's more of a conditional assessment approach that we apply. But ultimately, we use a number of different metrics to help us score and rank projects, specifically when it comes to larger scale projects and higher dollar projects. We also have kind of larger groupings of kind of what you might call blanket level funding, where we kind of react more to the very specific chronic issues that we might see, or acute type issues we might see specifically on our system. And so, a little bit different approach on the very small fine-tuned approach versus broad, but using metrics ultimately in data and a large number of different data sets to help guide our approach. And really exciting time in the system over the last 10 years, just how much more data driven we've been able to become as a company. And I'm sure everybody would echo that just within the industry. So, we mentioned AI, using AI also on veg with some way to predict, veg growth and where we see veg growth is the most critical, way to reduce, mitigate, or provide mitigation on our system. So next slide, please. All right, I think wrapping up and maybe just touch on this a little bit we talked about the performance improvement plan and specifically, detailing out how we improve some of these specific SAIDI and CAIDI metrics on our system specifically. But maybe turn it over to some of the rulemaking and Kyle to kind of wrap up there on.
Yeah, no, we'll touch on 220089. The important thing to consider here is that we view everything from reliability to resiliency to wildfire mitigation. All of these things are cousins, and sometimes strategies that may be implemented to benefit in one area are going to have benefits in the other, right? A safer pole for reliability is a safer pole for wildfire mitigation. And so as we move forward with the rulemaking, we want to make sure that we continue to improve processes through the rulemaking and that we continue to improve our ability to plan for distribution. And we ultimately plan for transmission just like we do for generation. And we really appreciate the opportunity and the open rulemaking and really this reporting opportunity and this opportunity to be before you and talk about what we're doing and how we make our decisions. We really thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Thank you for that. Any questions?
Thank you for the presentation. I do have a question for Commissioner Nyberg. Do you get a lot of lightning in southeast New Mexico?
If you're right.
When it comes.
All right, it checks out then.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate the thorough presentation. I don't have any questions.
It does lightning when it does.
I know why El Paso drivers are better than Albuquerque or Hobbs. Okay, so the investment question for you is 150% increase in CapEx from 2022 to 2024. That's a big jump. And
Yeah.
then, I mean, is there a reason?
Yeah, I think there's certainly reasons. Some of those capital investments, again, I think some of the bigger hitting items are things like the AMI deployment of metering and fan and the communication system that comes with that. That was a big part of some of those increases, specifically in 2024. We had the communication side of that rollout. AMI is just now coming, but the communication side was a 2024 pressure we saw on the capital side. Again, in some of these pressures that you see with that percent increase are maybe more Texas heavy than they are New Mexico. And so some of that is more of a Texas problem. Now, maybe I'll speak to that to caveat that it's probably not quite 150% if we looked at New Mexico pressure. Texas has a couple of very specific things they wanted to see as a state. So we've had some increased pressure there on specific programs related to new programs coming, reactions to wildfire and wildfire spend in 2024. We had a big push on priority poll program that we mentioned. We had a kind of a 3-year cycle and altering that to a 2-year and 1-year cycle. Advanced replacements of poles that we performed in 2024 to really get down to an annual replacement cycle and get on a shorter cycle approach. We had some additional patrol corrective action work that we did in 2024 as well in 3. The big story in New Mexico is really capacity. Southeast New Mexico capacity and distribution line mile build out. Number of substations. Knowing you live there and you've been there, you know it very well. You go down Pipeline Road and what that road looked like 15 years ago and what it looks like now, it's just almost unrecognizable. We had a line, I mean, I talk anecdotes, but bottom
No,
line,
I mean, that what P&M said is the numbers they reported here don't include build out. So is that?
Yeah, these numbers do include
they
build
do.
out.
Okay.
Yeah, and these numbers, and maybe back to kind of your rate case question for them, it's these numbers would tie fairly closely to additions, and the way we file a rate case wouldn't line up perfectly because it's capital expenditure, not in servicing and additions, and the way that's handled, but it would line up pretty closely. And these numbers are a whole company SPS, so they do include Texas numbers as well. And it does include a broad number of programs. It's not just, so we kind of classify, I'm sure similar to how P&M does as well, but we all classify programs kind of in different broad major categories. And so we have things like overhead, line extension work, which tends to be towards, in New Mexico region, tends to be large line extension towards Southeast New Mexico oil field build out. We have capacity type upgrades, which, again, New Mexico tends to be, reconductor work, rebuild of small wire to big wire, that sort of thing within Southeast New Mexico and build out. We have a certain amount of capital conversion work that we've done in some of our smaller communities around New Mexico, which has been a bigger ticket item over recent years. And that's around kind of modernizing those systems from a lower voltage 2400 Delta 4160 limited capacity distribution system to getting them to a 15 kV or 20 kV, 25 kV system where, you have additional capacity available. You have more modern system. You eliminate a lot of kind of some of the other concerns that we have from a capacity or quality of service problems. So yeah, it's a number of factors and a number of different categories within the broad capital expenditure within that chart.
Okay, that helps. And it was one of the things I was wondering, were we getting the same numbers from each utility, and we're not. And the other, if you go back to slide 16, step 8, what does within the authorized funding level mean? Go look at that slide.
Is there a way to bring the presentation up and look at it? See up here. Who's an approval? Okay, yeah. The way that's stated is really talking about the way that we authorize funding and capital within the company. And so we kind of broadly authorize capital in a 5-year budget, but then it gets specifically kind of approved and funded and authorized according to its specific scope within a kind of a managerial improvement process, if that makes sense.
So is the funding more a function of investment needed to produce return, or is it what does your utility need to do a good job at your job?
Yeah, of course, I'm going to answer that. Obviously, it's for our opinion of what it takes for us to do a good job and provide our customers with the quality of service they want, expect, and need, and provide public safety, service to new customers, adequate
Well, yeah, no,
capacity.
I understand
the-
you're here and you preface it with this
Sure.
is how I'm gonna say it.
Yeah.
Is that really
That's
what's
it.
happening?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I mean, something that's just a red flag was the concept that holding O&M flat. And then capital conversion. One of the things that we've done as an agency and trying to get better is we read the book California Burning.
Yes.
So do you understand why that's
Yes.
a red flag in regulator land?
Sure.
So in this process where you're picking capital funding and you're trying to replace O&M with capital, where is the internal discipline on how much capital gets spent?
Yeah, I would say the internal discipline is really around, and maybe kind of a little bit back to this slide, is really around trying to best quantify the risks and the expectations that we feel that we have on our system and respond to those in a way that's, prudent. And prudent is we can respond to with the constraints that we have within the industry, I guess is what I would say.
And then is part of that process customer focus? I mean, do you care about rate impact at all?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
how is that reflected in this 9-step process?
Yeah. And within the 9-step process, I would just say it's not a part of that 9-step process specifically as far as kind of the specific evaluation, maybe more from the engineering, the system performance and how we grade and rate projects. It's typically done, and maybe Kyle can probably jump in on this, more of a regulatory question. And certainly I'm involved with rate case and support testimony and discovery as well within Texas, New Mexico rate cases. But, it's more within the regulatory environment and compact on kind of how we choose to spend the capital big picture wise and what we can ultimately, we think of customers can afford from the big picture ticket items, and whether we're doing, let's say we have large generation investment that needs to occur due to generation problems. Well, that's going to create capital pressure in a manner that our customers can or wouldn't be able to afford it if we did transmission, generation, and distribution all within that same kind of block and window. And so we try to spread that capital pressure out and kind of from a broad company perspective, I think, manage that risk across our entire portfolio, our entire fleet, whether generation, transmission, distribution, in a way that tries to spread that work and do that over an appropriate period of time where it's more manageable and doesn't break the back of the customer.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, just to regulator ears, what that sounds like is we're going to guess how much we can charge our customers, and then we're going to set an amount of capital that we can spend. And then let's find as many projects as we can, spend that much money.
Sure.
And so that's the sin of California Burning. Right.
I think the general focus is that we identify what is needed and what improves the system. And from there, it's what can we do to benefit the customers? And as we benefit the customers, the cost piece of that it's part of every decision we make. I mean, we don't want to do anything from generation. We don't want to do anything from transmission or distribution, wildfire mitigation, any of the areas that you're seeing investment go in that is damaging to customers. The goal is to implement the projects that increase the safety, reliability, and resiliency of the system, while also being respectful and beneficial to the customers.
Imperfect, but by contrast, PNM had a cost benefit analysis that went into those decisions. Not sure that was great either, but so again, this is year one on this. I think part of the value of today is getting to a shared understanding of what this rule is and what it's intended to do. So appreciate you coming in and answering the questions. Commissioners, did you have any other questions for Ms. Yes. All right. Again, thanks for coming. And again, hopefully we don't sign you up for too much more windshield time.
Hey, we enjoy it. It's good being over here.
Yeah. And then next on this agenda item, last but not least, is Orland Whitney from the NMPRC staff. So are you ready, Mr. Whitney?
I believe so.
All right, let's go.
Like coming through at 4K 60.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Good afternoon, commissioners, utility representatives, staff, and the public. I'm Orland Whitney, an engineer with NMPRC's utility division, and I'm truly gracious to serve as technical staff today. Today, I present 2024 annual reliability metrics report summary for PNM, SPS, EPE. I greatly appreciate the excellent, detailed, and transparent presentations from our utilities. Your work makes our oversight stronger. And I want to apologize for the delay in our staff's analysis filings. SPS's staff analysis was due April 28th this year, but filed May 7th. So that was 9 days late. And EPE's and EPE's was 16. I was filed the 16th, so that was 18 days late, as well as the other. So again, my apologies for that. The utility triggered deadlines per New Mexico Administrative Code, Title 17, Chapter 9, Part 589, Section 10, were less visible in our tracking as they're newly implemented in this rule, causing that delay. So we're improving this for timely compliance next year. As a public servant, I take my role seriously, and we owe it to the public and our utilities timely, accurate information. So thank you for your understanding. This report provides key insights into reliability, performance, and efforts to enhance electric service across New Mexico per NMPRC requirements. Forgive me for any redundant information that EPE and others have covered. Again, I'm presenting after our boots on the ground, so to speak. So forgive me for any redundant information here. I may redefine acronyms as well, but as I learned while I was a student, the more times you see it, the better. So please bear with me if you're well versed in this. Redefinition is intended to be educational. Next slide, please. This slide clarifies the key reliability metrics we've analyzed for 2024. We reviewed SAIDI, the System Average Interruption Duration Index, which measures average outage duration per customer annually. SAIFI, the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, quantifies how frequently customers experience outages. CAIDI, the Customer Average Interruption Duration Index, shows the average length of outages for those customers affected. Additionally, we include CAIFI, which assesses how often affected customers experience multiple interruptions. Lastly, ASI, the Average Service Availability Index, indicates the overall percentage of the time service remained available. These metrics together provide a detailed picture of utility reliability, pinpoint specific areas needing improvement, and help guide investments and initiatives to enhance grid resilience. Next slide, please. Regarding the report submissions, PNM filed its 2024 annual reliability metrics report on March 14th and submitted the amended filing April 24th. To correct errors in the SI calculations where SAIDI was initially used in minutes instead of hours, and convert SI to percentage format to comply with IEEE standards. El Paso Electric Company filed its report March 17th with an amendment on April 2nd, which included corrections detailed in the amendments report Appendix A, primarily addressing data accuracy and clarification in outage and reliability metrics. Southwestern Public Service Company filed on March 14th, meeting the March 15th deadline with no amendments required. All three utilities complied with the affidavit requirements attesting to report accuracy. Their reports comprehensively cover required metrics, outage data, major event days, customer complaints, and wildfire impacts, meeting the NMPRC's standards. Next slide. So on this slide, we compared key reliability metrics for New Mexico's major utilities, excluding major event days for consistent comparison. SAIDI is measured in minutes and represents the average total outage duration experienced by each customer over the year. It's important because it quantifies how long, on average, customers are without power, helping utilities identify and reduce outage durations. SAIFI, or the System Average Interruption Frequency Index, is measured in interruptions per customer. This means it counts the average number of sustained outages each customer experiences annually. It is important because it reflects how often customers lose power, indicating the frequency of its interruptions. KD, or Customer Average Interruption Duration Index, measures the average outage duration for customers who actually experience interruptions, also in minutes. It's important because it shows how long outages last when they occur, helping utilities focus on restoration speed. And note that SPS does not require ASAI or MAFI due to metering limitations, and MAFI is not required for this report. I'll quickly note that all utilities have expressed that they're moving toward MAFI reporting. Next slide. PNM reported that its system experienced an average interruption duration index of approximately, or the SAIFI of approximately 124.45 minutes in 2024. That means that on average, each customer was without power for just over 2 hours during the year. The interruption durations, the interruption frequency index, or SAIFI, was 1.008, indicating that customers experienced about one outage each on average. The average duration of each interruption measured by KD was 123.51 minutes. The average service availability index, or SI, was 99.9763%, reflecting an overall reliability of the system, excluding major event days. It's important to note that MAFI, which measures momentary interruptions, was not reported due to lack of advanced metering infrastructure. Regarding outages, PNM experienced 6 major event days in 2024, as they've covered, contributing approximately 154 minutes to the SAIDI. These events included wildfires near Ruidoso, thunderstorms, and snowstorms. Outside of these major events, equipment failures and tree-related outages accounted for 28.2 and 18.9 minutes of SAIDI, respectively. Additionally, 6.13% of customers, or nearly 34,000 individuals, experienced outages lasting 12 hours or longer. PNM is actively working to improve reliability through initiatives such as deploying self-healing grid technologies like reclosers, investing the $4.97 million in AI-driven vegetation management I heard from Omni, and implementing wildfire mitigation strategies. The utility division finds that PNM's report is compliant with amended SI values corrected appropriately. To enhance transparency and reliability, the division recommends that PNM provide feeder IDs and locations for the worst performing feeders, conduct regular audits of the outage management system data, disclose bulk versus non-bulk transmission costs, report progress on grid modernization, advanced metering infrastructure to enable future MAFI reporting, and maintain detailed customer complaint data disaggregated by customer class and complaint mode. Next slide, please. Southwestern Public Service reported a 2024 SAIDI of 135.5 minutes, meaning that customers were without power for just over 2 hours on average. The SAIFI was 1.18 outages per customer, with an average outage duration, or KD, of 115 minutes. Momentary average interruption frequency index and average service availability index were not reported due to the absence of advanced metering infrastructure. Key outage causes included equipment failures, lightning and wind events, and a public safety power shutoff affecting 93 customers for about 27 hours. Major event days occurred on May 28th and July 4th. So Southwestern Public Service is actively improving reliability through initiatives such as the PSPS or Public Safety Power Shutoff protocols, fault location, isolation and service restoration technology, advanced distribution management system deployment, planned implementation of the customer experiencing multiple interruptions or semi-tool in 2025, and recloser modem upgrades. The semi-tool will help enable distribution engineers to accurately track and investigate customers who experience multiple interruptions beyond a set threshold. By identifying root causes of frequent outages, the utility can target preventative maintenance and infrastructure investments to reduce the interruptions and improve overall system reliability. The utility division finds Southwestern Services report compliant, but recommends disaggregating customer complaints by class and voltage, conducting regular audits of outage management system data, reporting progress on modernization and advanced metering infrastructure to enable future Mayfield reporting, and enhancing transparency by visualizing outage metrics on geographic information system maps. Next slide, please. Commissioners, El Paso Electric reported a 2024 SAIDI of 98.3 minutes, indicating customers were without power for just over 1.5 hours on average. The SAIFI was 0.889 interruptions per customer with a KD of 110.7 minutes. The SI was very high at 99.981%. Mayfield was not reported due to limited SCADA data, which restricts momentary outage measurement. Key outages included a June 29th windstorm contributing to 59.25 minutes to SAIDI, and equipment failures adding 36.7 minutes. Only 0.003% of customers, about 502 individuals, experienced outages lasting 12 hours or more. No wildfires were reported. EPE's reliability initiatives include feeder patrols, cable and transformer replacements, and cascade inspections to enhance system performance. The utility division finds EPE's report compliant, noting minor issues such as clarifying pole replacement numbers, which they've done today, and correcting the case number, which they also addressed. Recommendations include reporting SCADA progress to enable future Mayfield reporting, disclosing bulk versus non-bulk transmission costs, and implementing customer service representatives complaint logging for interruptions. This assessment aligns with Appendix A requirements and reflects EPE's ongoing efforts to improve reliability and transparency. Next slide. MAFI stands for the Momentary Average Interruption Frequency Index. It measures how often a customer's experience very briefly power interruptions, usually less than 5 minutes. Those momentary outages often happen when protective devices like reclosers or fault interrupters operate automatically. Tracking MAFI is important because it helps utilities identify and reduce these sort of interruptions, which improves overall power quality and customer satisfaction. Right now, PNM, SPS, and EPE do not report MAFI. The main reason for this is metering limitations. They lack the advanced metering infrastructure needed to capture these quick outages accurately. Without AMI, the data is incomplete or not significant enough to report. For example, EPE has limited SCADA coverage, SCADA being the system that remotely monitors and controls the grid equipment, which restricts the ability to gather reliable momentary outage data. Because of these gaps, utilities focus on reporting SAIDI, SAIFI, and KADI, which measures longer outages and have more reliable data. But the good news is all three are investing in grid mod. PNM and SPS are upgrading their metering systems and deploying advanced tools like SPS's circuit equipment monitoring and intelligence, or the semi tool I mentioned earlier, which will enhance real-time monitoring and help capture momentary outages in the future. EPE is expanding SCADA coverage and conducting feeder patrols, physical inspections of distribution lines, which improve system awareness and data quality. These efforts will pave the way for accurate MAFI reporting down the line. So while MAFI isn't reported today due to these technical and data challenges, ongoing modernization and infrastructure investments are expected to change that. We recommend continued updates on these efforts to track progress toward comprehensive reliability metrics. Next slide. Commissioners, when we talk about technology trends across the utilities, PNM uses an outage management system, or OMS, that's integrated with GIS or graphical information systems. What that means is they can track outages on a map in real time, helping them quickly locate and respond to problems. EPE is deploying a real-time OMS as well, which allows them to monitor outages as they happen and improve response times. SPS, on the other hand, is using modems and other advanced monitoring tools in the field to gather data and enhance their system visibility. Looking at weather impacts, PNM's reliability is often affected by monsoons and wildfire events, which can cause significant outages. SPS deals with severe storms and has also had to implement public safety power shutoffs, or PSPS, which are planned outages to reduce wildfire risk. EP's main weather challenges come from windstorms that can damage equipment and disrupt service. When it comes to customer complaints, SPS provides detailed reporting on complaints, giving a clearer picture of customer concerns. PNM and EPE place less emphasis on complaint details in their reports, focusing more on outage data and system performance. Finally, on data reporting, both PNM and EPE have submitted amended reliability reports recently. These amendments correct or clarify earlier data to ensure accuracy with regulatory requirements. So overall, while each utility uses different technologies and faces unique weather challenges, they all are working to improve reliability and transparency through better data and tools. Next slide. So to our recommendations, staff recommends the utilities improve the reporting and use of customer complaints, because these complaints reflect outage impacts, reveal important patterns, and help guide reliability improvements. To make this data more meaningful, complaints should be disaggregated by customer class, voltage level, and contact mode. For example, PNM already has robust complaint tracking and that disaggregates by customer class and contact mode, providing detailed insights. SPS, however, currently reports very few complaints and does not disaggregate them. So improving their complaint tracking is necessary to meet reporting standards. EPE has no complaints recently, but is now implementing, has had no complaints recently, but is now implementing customer service representative logging to capture and track complaints accurately going forward. We also recommend visualizing outage metrics like SAIDI and SAFE using GIS mapping. This approach enhances situational awareness during outages and supports better operational decisions. Additionally, conducting annual audits of the outage management system will help ensure data accuracy and integrity over time. Financial transparency can be improved by disclosing bulk versus non-bulk transmission costs separately. This distinction clarifies how costs are allocated between large-scale transmission and local distribution, supporting fair cost recovery and regulatory oversight. Finally, utilities should report progress on grid modernization efforts, including advanced metering infrastructure deployment for PNM and SPS, and SCADA system enhancements for EPE. These upgrades will support the future reporting of advanced reliability metrics such as MAFI. And next slide. Just like to take a second to say thank you for your time today. And I'll stand for questions, but I also wanted to, I was interested in Commissioner Nybert's interest in, Commissioner Nybert had a question about regarding safety values. PNM is at 1.008, SPS is at 1.18, and EPE is at 0.889. And these reflect the average number of sustained outages per customer in 2024. So to assess the normalcy, we benchmark against IEEE 1366 standards and regional data. SAFE around 1.0 is typical for utilities with mixed urban rural grids like PNM and SPS, where weather and equipment issues drive interruptions. So EPE's 0.889 is notably lower, reflecting its denser urban population area and fewer weather-related outages like the June 29th windstorm. So SPS is 1.18, while higher aligns with its exposure to severe storms and PSBS events. These values are within acceptable ranges for comparable utilities, but SPS could reduce SAFE through targeted FLISR and ADMS upgrades. So no red flags here, just nuanced grid dynamics. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Whitney, for that explanation. On slide 4, under SPS SAIFI, it says 115. That probably needs to be changed to 1.18.
Yes, that's an earlier draft, and it is
Okay.
a 0.18. That's correct. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I think that you may be looking at the Katie, or maybe you have an earlier version.
No, I must have an earlier version because mine has SPS 135.5,
Yeah, I'm seeing it correctly here.
115.0, 115.0, not reported. But it's correct on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Whitney. I appreciate your follow-up with Commissioner Nybert on, how these reliability metrics fit within industry norms. Same observation for you as I had for PNM. Your presentation doesn't address the costs at all. Do you see that as an important element of what we're trying to do here?
I do. I'm not an economist, so I did not address the costs. We'll do better next year, I suppose. If you'd like specific costs, please note those, and I'll try and track those down for you.
Well, one thing that I would like us to get to, and disappointing that staff couldn't do that this first year, is a benchmarking of these costs, right? We've got data available, money spent, miles of line, number of customers. How does that compare to utility within our 3 data point basket? And how does that compare to industry norms, industry average? Because heard some alarming things from some of them about how, hey, we're just spending capital, right? So, that might not be fair, but that's a takeaway we could have from it. And then I think reliability is very important. Seeing how the technology that we're approving is being used is very important. But at the end of the day, what ends up in customers' bills is as important as those things, right? Because we're talking about reliable and affordable. So
I agree. Yeah, well, while the presentation doesn't delve into cost analysis, it's important to benchmark capital and maintenance expenditures relative to infrastructure each utility manages. So PNM reported distributed capital expenditures peaking at 130.9 million in 2023, with I think approximately 18,000 line miles. So SPS had 306 million in distribution capital for 2024 over a similarly extensive network, and El Paso Electric has a smaller footprint of around 2,900 distribution line miles and reported significantly lower capital and O&M costs. So yeah, thank you, and we'll take those comments on our next go around.
yeah, and the other thing is just maybe upping the construction standard is the right move. But what's staff's opinion on that?
Yeah, and I would have to speak with others before giving my own assessment, but yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and then the final thing that's just personal experience from my part is, well, I guess it's kind of two things. What your reports came across to me as that compliance was the thing. So, we do need to do that review to make sure they're compliant with the rule. But what I was really hoping for and would like to see more of is, what does this information they provided to comply with the rule mean? So the examples of that was benchmarking, cost analysis, cost trends. Is this money being spent reasonably and efficiently, or one of the goals of this rule? So we have foundation, and again, in this moment where we've approved these things like AMI, are they actually being used in a way that's providing value? So we've already gone over that. The other that's just kind of a compliance versus what does the information mean. I was just fascinated that affidavits that got signed, two of them were from regulatory case managers. PNM's, I think it was their amended one, they did supply affidavits from the folks you described as boots on the ground. Do you see that as having any impact on the veracity of the information that's provided?
I don't believe so. I believe that this information comes from the experts at the utilities. So no, I've got no concern there.
I mean, if you called up a regulatory case manager, would you expect them to be able to answer questions on this information the way we were able to ask questions of the folks who gave the presentation here?
Sure, yes.
You do? Okay. I think we're in disagreement there. I really think when we're getting these affidavits, they should come from people who have experience working with the numbers, because a regulatory person is receiving the numbers and compiling them and making sure it complies with the details of the rule. Do they really know why the company chose to spend $1 on capital versus $1 on O&M? I wouldn't expect that of them, but.
Yeah, well, cost prudency is determined in rate case filings, so.
So in this rule where we're asking for cost information, that's not important?
It is important, but cost prudency is determined in rate case filings, not individual.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand how I want to get us beyond just a check the box mode when we're reviewing things against a rule, and wondering if that's an area for improvement. And then final thing, I hope that you're able to watch all of these presentations. I know we've been at it for a while. Do you have any recommendations for instructions we can provide to improve the filings so they're more valuable?
Yeah, I do. I think, one question I had for PNM, for instance, they mentioned balloons, being just hot air balloons, but I'm sort of curious as to whether those include Mylar balloons as well. I know that's an issue with El Paso Electric. Their birthday balloons are actually a serious problem. They do go up and cause outages in the power lines. So that is something that I think needs granularity. Basically, any more granularity just informs the public better. So I think that's general takeaways for me. But yes, the overall presentation, kind of a lot that I presented today, I think aligns well with what the reports submitted by the utilities said. So, for instance, PNM's 2024 annual reliability metric report demonstrates compliance with the rule. 589 and provides a comprehensive overview of reliability, performance, infrastructure maintenance, and plan improvements, which is consistent with the presentation's emphasis on these areas. So, but as far as, you know, specific improvements, you know, I think the color coding, I can work with each utility on those things. And, you know, I think just a gradient of red to green to indicate to the public where problem areas exist would be helpful.
What about the table 10.2 info?
In what regard?
Oh, for example, you know, P&M read the rule is just, they reported what they're calling reliability spend. SPS read it to include basically their total spend. Which of those two was the right approach? How do we get everybody on the same page? And then just contrast our New Mexico jurisdictions being treated differently, and is that good or bad? Those are the kind of things we weren't able to get to today because of how the information was presented. So is that a problem? How do we solve it?
My take on that is that over time, those things will improve. This is the first year that these reliability metrics reports are required. So I believe that those things will improve with the next go around. So, you know, those discrepancies in table 10.2 arise because some interpret 10.2 as reflecting total distribution capital and O&M expenditures, while others understand the rule to require separate reporting of capital versus O&M costs. So yeah, I think those things over time will improve, but I think that's sort of on us to define those things for our utilities.
You finished with what I was wondering is, will it happen naturally or do we need to help?
I believe it will happen naturally. I apologize, maybe long-winded there.
No, I thought where you landed is it would be helpful if we help.
Yeah, that as well, but you know, I think maybe it's both. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, in that regard, I'm wondering if we should encourage each of the utilities to maybe get with Mr. Whitney and have a debrief or discuss among yourselves now that we've seen everybody's reports, and kind of try to get to some understanding of how to address maybe some of the issues that were not consistent between the three companies, so that next year we do get kind of consistent information.
I think that's a great suggestion. And then I guess I just add to that, can we get some kind of report out so the world can see it?
Yes, I think, you know, I think that would be an important outcome for the public. So I agree there.
Great. And then again, you know, Mr. Whitney, same grace everyone else got. This was first time through. And so, yeah, we complied with the rule. That's great. I saw a lot of opportunity for improvement next year. So let's try to do that too. And if you got any questions for me on that, go ahead and reach out. Any other questions before we remember that we're still in a regular open meeting and go back to the agenda here? Okay, seeing none, we'll move. Do you need a break or do we want to move on? There's not much left.
Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
That's how long it's just.
Okay, Chief of Staff, go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Just a few updates. We're reaching the end of the fiscal year, so that means that new equipment and office supplies will be forthcoming. Last year, we got backpacks and lanyards. This year, at the very least, we'll be distributing PRC branded notepads for staff. And we are continuing to work towards the close of the fiscal year. So watch for more on that. The other thing that I'd like to inform you of, it's a very exciting thing, and that is by the end of the fiscal year, June 30th, all employees should have a computer manufactured this decade. So it's very exciting. Our IT department has been working on deploying all of those, collecting the ancient ones that are still out there. And so very excited to get everybody on a modern computer that does modern computer things. I think if you haven't already, you're slated for that too, even though you're on modern computers, there are new, more modern computers coming your way. The work on the e-docket transition continues to absorb much staff time. So thankful to all of the staff members who are putting in their time on that specifically. Well, there's many of them, but I really want to recognize not just Jordan and Eldon who are working on that, but also Melanie, who's at the center of much of what's happening there. So I know there's a lot of work going in there, and it's extra work on top of the work that we normally do day to day. So I want to extend my appreciation for that and share how excited I am. The rollout is still a long ways away, but we're making progress, and that's very exciting. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you very much. Communications with commissioners. I think I emptied my bucket already. We're going to Portland next week, and then, well, I guess I didn't also say I'm going then from Portland to Washington, DC. FERC is doing a technical conference on resource adequacy. They're focusing on RTOs. So I'm in an interesting position. I'm going to go on and sit on a panel for RTOs without a capacity market, which is like SPP, California ISO. But I'm also the only commissioner who's going to be there that lives in the wild west, where there's not only no capacity market, but no RTO. Encourage people to look at what comments were filed, especially fellow panelist Travis Kavula. He had been a commissioner in Montana. And from what I've seen, he does an in-depth analysis on what capacity costs in these different regions with different paradigms for capacity market. And the news for the desert Southwest is pretty grim. So encourage you to look at that. And then I'm open to learn from participating on that panel what point Mr. Kavula is making, and bring that back. So anyway, that's what I will be doing between now and when we get back 2 weeks. Commissioner Nyberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, like to thank Jennifer for making sure that the commissioners recognize blue suit, white shirt, and blue tie day. Oh, okay. Well, you were close. The other thing I'd like to report is had breakfast with Senator Gallegos, and he complimented one of our Pipeline Safety Bureau staff members, Gabriel Estrada, and was very complimentary of his work and working with Senator Gallegos on some issues that he's dealing with in Southeast New Mexico. And so if Jason Montoya is listening, please make sure that Mr. Estrada hears our appreciation for his representing our agency well in front of the senator. And then lastly, I think we need to recognize one of our own. I think we have a recent photograph that was circulated today by NARUC, and one of our own, Commissioner Aguilera, is prominently featured with some other industry leaders at the Clean Power Conference held by the American Clean Power Association, this past couple weeks where you presented that. So that's a nice photograph of Commissioner Aguilera there in that conference. And again, appreciate all the staff and all the work that they do and trying to bring me up to speed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Last word, and you're a lot taller than Devontae Lewis.
I hate every picture of me, so thanks for embarrassing me. No, just kidding. Yeah, so I did that conference and as the chair mentioned, we'll be in Portland next week for the Western Conference. And then I'll have a couple more coming up to talk about transmission, one in New York. It's called the US Infrastructure Conference. And then another one in Arlington, Virginia, to speak on transmission as well. It's an interconnection and transmission conference. And aside from that, just wanted to touch on one of the items that we didn't talk about today, which is the West Connect Planning Management Committee. And so just wanted to give you a little bit of insight there, as that's an item that I had requested be placed on the agenda. And I asked a couple of staff members to draft a memo to consider whether the commission should seek to place somebody on the planning management committee. There are different sectors that can be represented, and there's not a whole lot of participation outside of the utilities. Last December, there were no members for the states sector. And since then, the Colorado Commission has placed somebody on there. And I was thinking that we should evaluate whether we should do the same. And so that is what that item is about. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk about that next time and make a decision as to whether to include somebody on the planning management committee, and if so, who it should be. So I would envision that all of that, we'll have all of that information, including if we do decide who to appoint someone, have the person already lined up for that. So that's all I had. Thank you for the presentations and the discussion today.
Great, thank you. Is there any objection to adjourning? Oh, seeing none, we adjourned.